Sure. Esparza,
Here.
Peralez,
Here.
Diep, Foley,
Here.
Camus.
Here.
Thank
Okay.
you.
We have a quorum. And whoops, let me go to the agenda here on my calendar. So this is the review of the work plan. Item number 1.
Yeah, this item went to the Rules Committee. We recommend dropping it, and we will be re-agendizing it in the first half of next year.
Okay, can I get a motion to agendize this next year?
So moved.
Oh, second.
Okay. All right, good. We gotta, everybody's paying attention today. I'm trying to bring up all these little boxes that I have to bring up with people holding hands up and what have you. So looks like we have a member of the audience who is holding his hand up on the deferral of item number 1, which is the work, which part of the work plan is that again? 5, that is local hire and business utilization programs. So that is going to be moved to next year. A phone number with 5140 has his hand up. Go ahead. You're on. Phone number 5140.
5140, you were briefly unmuted, but you're muted again. There you
There
go.
I go. Hey guys, everybody, happy Thanksgiving. I just want to let you know that you guys aren't invited to Thanksgiving, nor any San Jose PD, because I know you guys are going to probably try to follow those directives from the governor of California. And if you guys need some more workers, make sure that you can build more artwork towards BLM and Antifa that's going to be permanent in front of City Hall. That's important. You guys are spending millions of dollars on this, and it's great. So maybe you'll have some apprentices or some workers or some temp workers who can help build more Marxist artwork. I mean, your building looks Marxist already. Looks like the Death Star. But anyway, if you guys want to come over for Thanksgiving, I'll make sure to put a pie in your face. Thanks a lot, City Council.
Okay, well, can we get a roll call vote on?
Esparza,
Yes.
Peralez,
Aye.
Diep.
Hi.
Thank you. Foley.
Aye.
Camus.
Aye. Okay, so our next item is the consent calendar. Currently has nothing on it, but because this calendar has so many different agenda, I have 7 of them. My suggestion would be to move item 7 to consent. If anybody has any objections to that, does anybody want to consider moving item number 7 to consent? And item number 7 is the real estate activities, surplus sales, and leasing activities economic report.
Johnny May, is it possible if instead of moving it to consent that we defer to January? Or consent is fine with me if that's what.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, if
It's just a
yeah.
it's an
Well,
update.
basically, I'm trying, because there's so many meaty items on this, and I'm hoping not to shorten anybody's public speaking time. I just want to see if we can. This one is kind of a. What do you think, Kim? Should we defer it, or should we just put it on consent? I know staff is ready to go on it. So.
Yeah, it's up to you. It's a relatively straightforward item, which is why you could consider putting it on consent, and staff is comfortable with that. However, you could also direct us to re-agendize it for the next work plan.
Move to consent, recommend that we move item 7 to consent. Thanks, Kim.
Second.
Okay, we'll open that since it's got a first and a second, the consent calendar. Is there anybody from the public who wants to speak on the deferral of item number 7? It seems like there isn't, and we will entertain a roll call vote.
Esparza,
Yes.
Peralez,
Aye.
Yep,
Aye.
Foley,
Aye.
Camus.
Aye. Okay, item number 2 is the,
I just want to be clear on, is the attorney and clerk clear on what you voted on? Because I thought that the motion was to put it on consent, but when Johnny summarized the motion, he said you're voting to defer. So I just want to make sure everybody understood that the motion was to put on consent.
Yes.
So
Yes, that's what I understood. And so now we need to vote on consent.
correct.
apologize for misstating that. So now we'll vote on consent.
Yes.
Can I get a motion to vote on consent?
So
Move
moved.
to approve.
So,
Okay, and it looks like there's one hand up, Councilmember Esparza.
Sorry, I don't know what that's from. I'll take it down.
Okay, all right. All in favor, I guess, roll call again.
Yes. Esparza,
Yes.
Peralez,
Aye.
Yep,
Aye.
Foley,
aye.
Camus.
Aye. Okay. We'll save that. Okay, now on to item number 2, which is the annual verbal report, item number 1, verbal report on economic development activities from our
Great.
staff.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to kick off this item and then turn it over to Nancy Klein and Elizabeth Handler. And I want to start by expressing appreciation to our committee chair, Johnny Camus, as we realize this will be his last meeting as our chair. And Johnny, I just really want to thank you for your service on this committee, including the last few years as chair. And you've been just a real pleasure to work with. You've given this committee just a steady hand, created a good environment for the committee to do its work. Many of you may not realize the amount of time that's put in behind the scenes to prepare for the meeting, to understand the items, to help us create the work plan every 6 months. So I just really want to recognize you, Council Member, Chair Camus, and thank you for your service and your leadership of this committee. You've made a good and big difference in our community and economic development.
Thank
So
you.
let's
Thank
give
you,
him a
Kim.
round
It's-
of applause as best we can on virtually. And then I also, Lun, I don't know if you're there and just not showing yourself. I think you're there, but I also want to extend, there he is, excellent, appreciation to you. You've been just a really cornerstone member of this committee, always fully present and prepared and engaged. And we've spent a lot of time on the challenges of development in North San Jose, and I never doubted your commitment to move the region forward in a very thoughtful way. And I know you spent a lot of time, again, outside of this committee, sharing ideas and troubleshooting, and you've always been just a really terrific partner. So I just want to thank you for your service and your commitment to this committee. And to community and economic development. You will both be missed.
Thank you, Kim. I spent a lot of hours talking to you and Chris Burton and Rosalind, and whatever I take away from this, the experience and the knowledge, I think I gained the most from my conversations with the three of you. So thank you, and the time on this committee with my colleagues. So I appreciate that.
Okay. So thank you. Okay, let's turn it over to Nancy and Elizabeth then for the verbal report.
I just wanted to add my thanks and wish you the very best in the future, and happy Thanksgiving and holidays. And I'll turn this over to the very capable Elizabeth Handler to walk through the report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Elizabeth Handler, Public Information Manager, Office of Economic Development. And I'm happy to share with you our report on the past month's activities. And you'll see a slightly different format. And you will also forgive me for doing a really fast leap over our first subject, because it's a report you're about to hear in some depth from Chris and other members of our department. So I don't want to spoil the surprise for them. So I'm going to jump over that one very quickly and move to the second item, which is a new microloan program that was launched specifically for small businesses in the state of California. And we are working very closely with the lenders and the organizers of this particular loan program to ensure that the borrowers, potential borrowers in the San Jose area have a good chance of getting onto the application process as soon as possible. So that we're working hard on getting the word out on that. We had a very active, as I'm sure you realize, a very active month responding to the zigs and zags in the process of managing the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We were in orange, we were put back in red, and then we jumped all the way back to purple. And communicating that across 5 languages, very challenging. But this is sort of a little bit of a summary of how we went about that and the process that was involved. We had some good news to announce in the extension of the commercial eviction moratorium. And we also had some really cheering news to share. And much credit has to go to our Office of Cultural Affairs in having brought us an amazing exhibit. And even if you can't get to the airport to see it, it's called Hold the Moment. And it is a program that was put on by OCA that provides $2,500 stipends to artists who created their artistic expression of what has been going on with them during the pandemic and the quarantine. So it's 77 artists got the grants and shared their images. They're at the airport physically. If you can't get there, go to the ACA website, the Office for Cultural Affairs. And these are going to be shown in groups all the way through May. So it's an exciting exhibit, and we're really pleased to have this record of the COVID process here in San Jose. Another wonderful thing happened this past October was a month's worth of movies. The Up on the Roof promotion that was done thanks to 3 Below, the movie house. They put a full drive-in experience on the roof of the parking garage. And there are more photos of it. This is the nighttime scene. As you can see, there are little pods of 2, 3, and 4 seats together, so households could group together. And there were food and snacks, and we have a description of it and some of the input from people who attended, courtesy of our downtown association, who do guest blog posts for us. And then we refer people to our online events calendar that is maintained by Team San Jose, which provides everything from online yoga lessons to what restaurants are open or are providing pickup or delivery, and lots of online entertainment options since we can't go there in person. And that's the end of the report.
Thank you. I'll now go to public comment, and we have one person with his hand raised, a blue hand, phone number 5140. This is the report on economic activities for the city of San Jose.
Yeah, you guys are doing a great job with the economy there. You guys, all these businesses out of business, all these fees and taxes. You guys better get off the dime, or you're going to go broke. How are you going to pay for these pensions for these cops and firemen and city workers, hundreds of thousands of dollars for the rest of their lives, if you don't get off the dime and start getting serious about the economy of San Jose and Santa Clara County? You guys just think this money falls from the sky, don't you? Well, it's interesting how you guys are giving out more tickets and fines, and you can't even collect that because, well, traffic court's closed. But you don't know that because that's with the county that distributes the money back to you. You guys don't realize that. But hey, who's going to be coming to San Jose anytime soon? I don't even know who came here to begin with. But you guys better get your shit together when it comes to managing the money and the revenue for this city if you want to be able to pay all those fat pensions to these people.
Okay, well, that was our the end of public comment there on that item. And I too want to thank you, Kim and Nancy and the whole team. When I think of professional, competent, hardworking staff people for the city of San Jose, I think of you and your team. Economic activities have never been more important. Our economy's stuck, especially our small businesses, which are hurting. But I'm happy that you and your team are there for our community. I hope that we understand that the economy means the tax dollars are coming in, it means jobs, and it means people have housing and employment. And without economic activity, we would have none of that. And I appreciate all your efforts to spur our economic activities. It's been an honor to serve with all of you and all of my council colleagues on this committee, especially as chair. Thank you for allowing me to serve our community in this way, a way that I think I have some expertise in, so coming from the business world myself. So thank you, Kim. All right, since that was just a report, we'll move on to our next item, which is item number, I think, 2, which is the annual performance review of Team San Jose.
Good afternoon, Joe Roy, City Auditor. I'm here to present our annual performance review for Team San Jose for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. We just have a verbal report today. So I'm joined by Caroline Worden from my office, as well as Carrie Adams Hapner from the Office of Cultural Affairs. Representatives from Team San Jose are here also. So since 2004, the San Jose McHenry Convention Center and several other city-owned facilities have been operated on the city's behalf by Team San Jose. Additionally, since 2009, Team San Jose has operated the San Jose Convention and Visitors Bureau. Under the terms of the management agreements between the city and Team San Jose, an annual performance audit by the City Auditor's Office is required to determine whether and how well Team San Jose achieved agreed upon performance targets that are the basis for an incentive payment, which is in addition to the regular management fee that the city pays Team San Jose. The incentive payment for fiscal year 1920 would be $250,000 if Team San Jose met its performance goals. Performance areas within the agreements include gross operating results, which accounts for 40% of the incentive score, hotel room nights booked, which accounts for 20% of the incentive score, estimated economic impact based on estimate of average daily spending rates by event attendees, which again accounts for 20% of the incentive score, theater occupancy, which accounts for 10%, and finally customer satisfaction, which accounts for the final 10%. Before we get to the results, I do want to talk about the impacts of COVID-19 on Team San Jose and the operations of the various facilities. As you know, in response to the county health orders to limit the spread of the COVID-19, the various facilities were closed for normal operations, and all events post March 16th were canceled. This had a huge impact on Team San Jose's ability to hit their performance targets under the agreement. The management agreement does allow for adjustments to the performance targets if hotel tax revenues change by 15% compared to what was expected in the adopted operating budget. And if that occurs, the targets can be adjusted commensurate with the change in hotel tax revenues. And as a result, we adjust the performance targets downward by 37%, which is how much hotel tax revenues came in under what had been budgeted. Saying that, we did find that Team San Jose did not meet its overall weighted incentive fee score. Team San Jose did meet its target for 4 of the 5 agreed upon performance targets as adjusted for the decline in hotel tax revenues. Team San Jose booked over 100,000 hotel room nights as adjusted for the, had an estimated economic impact of $62.7 million, held 369 days of events at the cultural facilities, and received 98% satisfaction ratings on its customer service surveys. However, it fell short on gross operating results, and because that accounts for 40% of the total weighted incentive score, Team San Jose was unable to meet the overall performance target and thus did not qualify for the annual management incentive. The shortfall in the gross operating results measure, again, is primarily a result of the COVID-19 impacts on operations. Operating revenues were down 44% from the prior year. We note in the report that many large events that had been scheduled for the spring of 2020 were canceled, including events by Facebook, Apple, and other organizations. With that, I'd ask you to accept our report and cross-reference the December 8th City Council agenda, and I'd like to thank Team San Jose, the Office of Cultural Affairs, and the city's budget office for their insight and cooperation during the audit. We're happy to answer any questions, and I believe the administration has a few words to say first. And as I said, representatives from Team San Jose are also here to help answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you,
Great.
Joe.
Great, thank you. And I think I'll take it from here. Thank you. I want to thank the City Auditor's Office for their continuing really excellent work and supporting our work and this contract. And one of the things I wanted to mention two things. And first, I want to just commend Team San Jose for its outstanding work in fiscal year 1920. And I just want to say, I just want to really communicate to the committee that, Team San Jose was probably the envy of all convention center management organizations around the world. And that we were going to have, once again, international conferences like Facebook and Apple at our convention center, which is really a postcard to the world. So I really just want to commend them for their outstanding work and recognize that we will be coming back, once this pandemic is over, once again, we will be that envy of the world. I'm very confident in that. But because of this, and because of these circumstances that are outside of Team San Jose's control, I just want to foreshadow to the committee that the administration is planning to do a special recommendation to the full council when this item is cross-referenced on December 8th. And we're going to be making a special recommendation to do a one-time incentive fee payment to Team San Jose that would be prorated and looking at their performance from July 1 through March 1st and looking at those 8 out of 12 months. So our approach was to apply that same formula to the incentive fee of $250,000 and prorate it by 166,500. We're also going to be making some other reconciliations around that too, which we'll explain in the memo when it comes forward to the full council as well. But I just want to foreshadow that with you so that you're aware, because we know that we are, to say what we all know, we're in unprecedented times, but we do want to acknowledge the incredible work that this organization has done on behalf of our city and the work that they were on track to do for this fiscal year. There's one other thing I want to really emphasize to this committee is that the administration that is comprised of, the Office of Economic Development, the Budget Office, the City Attorney's Office, the Finance Department, we are in lockstep with Team San Jose during this pandemic. We are constantly working with them to ensure that we're on track, that we're being, we are meeting all the fiduciary responsibilities that we have to steward these really important public resources, whether they're our facilities or public funds. So I just want to really underscore that with you, that we are on a constantly regularly meeting and communications with them, just so that we are in sync. And I also just want to emphasize to the committee that the Team San Jose board, which I'm an advisory member to, alongside Councilmember Perales, is also incredibly well governed. They take a very, very strong pride in their role as board members and really have kind of a tight grip on that organization as well. So I just want to underscore that to the committee. So we'll be speaking further with the full council when we come to you on December 8th, but that concludes my remarks for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. And is there anybody else from Team San Jose or anybody else making any comments? No.
I think they're just here. I thought they're here to answer questions.
Okay.
So
All right.
if there's anything directly to them, they'd be happy to speak up, I believe.
That's fine. And so now we'll go to public comment. We have phone number 5140, and this is on the Team San Jose audit, please.
Yeah, you guys are looking like you got a shortfall going on there, people. I was reading the presentation and everything. What are you guys going to do for the money? I mean, Pothead Peralez says that there's going to be plenty of fines and fees that are going to pay for all this, but how are you going to come up with the money? I'd like you to answer where all this money is going to come from for the year 2021. I mean, I know that you guys spent millions of dollars for that new artwork down at City Hall during a budget shortfall. You also gave a special district to the LGBTQXYZ community so they could have a half of a block of some sort of historic, I don't know what community. You guys have all this money for these worthless things, and now you're gonna have even less. From January to June, those 6 months, you guys are gonna be grim, man. I'm wondering if you're even gonna have. I wonder if you're gonna have to lease out City Hall to pay your bills. I mean, right now, I'm driving over a bumpy road here in San Jose, Jeff Davis's district, by the way.
Let's stick to the topic, which is Team San Jose's audit. Please.
Hey, how do I join this? How do I join this winning team? How do I join this winning team? That's what I want to know. Team for what? Team of losers, you people down there. You guys are gonna. I look forward to watching you guys fail in 2021. Good luck.
Okay, on to council. We'll start with Councilmember Foley.
Thank you, and thank you from Joe and your team for the audit on Team San Jose. Carrie, I had a question for you about the incentive that you will be bringing forth to the city council. It was my understanding that the $250,000 in the audit that has been paid is an incorrect amount and it should be 200. Isn't that correct? I thought it was an overpayment by 50,000, that the incentive fee was 200.
Yes, so yes, let me address that. So the auditor did accurately identify that there was an overpayment in fiscal year 18-19 to Team San Jose. And, we have representatives from the budget office that can also speak to that. But it was really an administrative error in terms of how the budget was loaded for that fiscal year. And so when we looked, so we thank the auditor's office for correctly identifying that. And so what we will be doing, because what happened is essentially in the first 5 years of their 3-term contract, their incentive fee was for $200,000. And now they're entering into the second 5-year term of their 15-year contract. And at that time, their incentive fee goes up to $250,000. And so what happened is, is a very human mistake where the budget got loaded. Instead of it being $200,000, it was a $250,000 got appropriated. And so that was what was paid. So we thank the auditor's office for identifying that. We've already communicated to Team San Jose that we need to do some type of reconciliation. So that will be part of the reconciliation that comes forward to the full council. So when we come to the council to identify a special one-time incentive fee, our approach is to take that prorated amount of $166,500 and reduce it by $50,000 for a total recommendation of a one-time fee of $116,500.
Carrie, that's exactly what I was going to get to, is that the incentive should be based on the 200,000. And so you're going to prorate it based on 250, but scale it back 50,000. Is that right?
Correct. And
So
thank
the
you
net
for-
result is
thank-
the same.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I know I appreciate, I so appreciate, this committee's math skills and that you really are a great committee of very savvy business people, and you understand kind of the financials behind a lot of the work that we do. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, and so that we can be very transparent about it. And that is something we're going to articulate very explicitly in our memorandum.
Good enough. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you. That's it for
Okay.
me.
Okay, Councilmember Foley. Councilmember Paralysis has his hands up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just curious for this coming year, if indeed that incentive payment does get approved by the council, if maybe I see John LaFortune on here, if we can get an idea on where that might be spent for this coming year, just considering that clearly things are operating a lot differently than they were years past. John, I think we barely heard you. Never mind, we can't hear you.
I didn't hear him at all, actually. I didn't hear him.
If John, you're not able to use your phone, maybe either EHOB or Ben could speak to that point in terms of how Team San Jose uses the incentive fee, which goes into its corporate account.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Ehab Sabri. I am the CFO of Team San Jose. Thank you for the question. Basically, this money goes to our corporate account. Corporate account is basically used for any donations or any charity work that actually geared towards the community. It's not really used at all at the operations, at all at the CCF operations. So basically the money will be piling up in the account, and we'll be waiting for any charity events or any donation we need to make to the community. So basically we don't spend any of this incentive money in the operation of the convention center.
Is there a specific, though, shift in direction for the coming year if you were to get the incentive again, considering that again, operations are not as normal? My understanding as being a liaison as well is that, right, this has gone to some things that traditionally would actually be occurring at times in the convention center, or activities to incentivize events that were, going to be coming. And so with that not necessarily being on the horizon, is there a different thought for where this would actually be spent? Or is it the same understanding it's going to kind of sit in a pot of money as you described, Ehab, and the board will make that decision?
Sure. Yeah, we don't spend any money without on that particular corporate account, which include the incentive money, without the board approval, the chairman and the board approval. So as far as I understand, in the past 12 months or so, which I've been with the convention center, we have given money to Hunger at Home, basically charity events. So we're most likely we're going to continue on the same trend until things actually clarify and we know where we stand with the pandemic. But yeah, this money is still going to be geared towards charity events and like Hunger at Home, donation, any help we can actually do to help the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add that John just sent me a text that the link that he had received is not allowing him to use his mic. I'm not sure why. But I also will just elaborate, in addition to the uses that EHOB had just outlined. As an advisory board member, I do also see that the board, which I don't have a voting role in, has approved other uses for this corporate account, and they include things such as Team San Jose's attorney fees for when it's, say, negotiating with the city on its contract. So it uses its own separate corporate account, its own fees to pay their attorney for that type of work, like contract negotiations. And there's some other uses for it as well. But those are the types of things. But I will say, based on my experience, that the board has a very strong, very conservative fiduciary role on that when it comes to the use of those funds, and they're very careful about how they're spent, because they do want to ensure that Team San Jose has adequate reserves.
Thank you, Carrie. This is Ehab again. Just remember that we also spend money out of this account on the employees' holiday party, which is basically held every year. And this year we have canceled that party, and I don't think we have anything to spend at this point out of the incentive money. Thank you.
Okay, is that it, Councilmember Perales?
Chair, I just
yeah.
have a follow-up question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was going to call on you next, Pam. Okay.
All
go
right,
ahead.
I didn't know if you
No
saw my
worries.
hand again.
I did. Go
I
ahead.
just had a quick question for Team San Jose. I appreciate the economic difficulties that you've suffered being a convention bureau organization and bringing in tourists and all of that. But I wondered if you were able to benefit from a PPP loan from the federal government, or you're quasi-government and were not able to apply. I was curious about that.
Thank you for the question. This is Ehab again, the CFO of Team San Jose. As per our contract, we're not actually allowed to apply for any loan as per the contract. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay. Maybe we can get a council member to make a motion to take this a report and cross-reference it to, was it the December 8th meeting?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, wonderful. I had a couple questions of my own, Hab, if you can. I know that there was a lot of activities at the community center. I'm sorry, at the convention center with our homeless population. And in the report, I noticed that there was the amount of, utility costs were almost the same as last year. Almost $3 million were spent in, actually more than $3 million were spent in utilities this year as it was last year. And that kind of struck me as odd because, last year we had all these, Comic-Con and Apple and all these other conventions. How is it that we're spending almost the same in utilities this year as we did last year? Did we just keep the air conditioning and heating on?
Thank you for the question. We actually have some increase in rates by PG&E, which we've been, working with them about. Also, we have, the chillers and the AC and all that, the coolers, the chillers, the boilers have to be running as well. So these items actually should be operating all the time. We also have the kitchen is working for the homeless meals as well. We also have South Hall with the homeless, but we still charge them for that, for the electricity. So I understand your concern, but yeah, we brought it up to PG&E, and they're actually looking into the rates because the rates have gone sky high. I don't know if the rates are a result of compensated for the fire in California or what's going on, but we have not gotten a straight answer for them yet.
Yeah, with it, spending more than $3 million in electricity is quite a bit of money.
Yeah, we're actually taking a lot of measures for energy saving, turning off the lights and also turning off the marquees for the CPA and other theaters, turning off the lights in all the offices. Basically, security team is going around making rounds, make sure all the lights are off. Drain the fountains. The fountains are not running anymore for the theaters. So we've taken a lot of measures basically for energy saving. But however, this is all billing from PG&E that we're working with them on that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you. It seemed high. All right. Well, thank you again for the report, and we'll go to a vote on the motion.
Esparza,
Yes.
Perales,
Aye.
yep. Yep. Foley,
Aye.
I got both. Camus.
Aye.
I wanted to go back to D1. There is action on the agenda to accept the report on D1. So we would like to have a motion to accept that verbal report.
So moved.
Can we get a second?
Although, yeah, this is it. Although for verbal reports that don't have an actual report or a presentation, you don't need to have a vote on it.
That's what I thought. I've never had anybody vote on it in the past, but if you want to.
Okay,
vote,
I was just looking at the language because the language is to accept the report. So I was just going based on that. I don't normally attend your committee meetings.
That's fine.
Yeah, so Tony, normally when it's a verbal report without an actual staff report or a presentation slides, it's normally the verbal report is not a report that needs to be accepted.
Okay, since we have a motion, I'm going to go ahead and call roll for it, but I'll for the future. Esparza?
We didn't.
Yes.
We didn't. I don't think we got a second, but I can second it.
Perales?
Aye.
Thank you. Dieppe?
Aye.
Foley? Foley? Thank you. Camus?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. On to item number 3, the Economic Recovery Work Plan update.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. Chris Burton with the Office of Economic Development. 1 second while I just share my screen to pull up the presentation. Okay, do you see the presentation? Hopefully. Good. All right. So I know we're a little tight on time today. We have a packed agenda, so I'm going to fly through these slides pretty quickly in a fairly short amount of time. So we're not going to dig in too deep on the numbers that we have here, but we wanted to present to you kind of how we're thinking about the economic recovery, how we're monitoring the situation in the economy, and ultimately how that's shaping our work within OED, and then also within the context of the EOC Recovery Work Plan. Before I get going, I just want to give a special shout out to the whole business development team, but in particular, Bige Yilmaz, who's our lead on data analytics and has been crunching the numbers for a whole number of different departments, but sort of keeping us aware of everything that's going on. And then the team more broadly is really focused on delivering access to services and information to ensure that our business community can stay open when they can safely, and continue to sort of contribute to our economic recovery. So diving in, I just wanted to touch really quickly on the national economy. You can't really escape what's going on at a national level. Obviously, we're seeing some signs of the national economy rebounding after the initial jolt that resulted from the onset of the pandemic. The overall recession that we saw starting earlier in the year showed much deeper declines in GDP and much greater job losses than even the 2008 Great Recession. But it does appear to be rebounding at a national level, but that is generally uneven across a number of different segments and for many different types of businesses. Now, what we've been seeing is that the recovery and the rebounding is really being buoyed by the infusion of stimulus dollars earlier in the pandemic. And where there has been sustained recovery is really within our tech community, right? So advertising, e-commerce, and communications are just some of those industries that are flourishing right now as folks are spending more time at home. The challenge is that while we've seen some recovery through 2020, we're still starting to see a lot of uncertainty as we look towards 2021. Especially around this current wave of the pandemic and seeing the increased rate of cases and infection, and that notion of a repeated slowdown and shutdown and impacts around regulation is going to have a significant effect and present a longer term danger to many of the businesses that are struggling to stay open. In addition, the opportunity for additional stimulus at the federal level seems limited due to all the post-election uncertainty surrounding the sort of future balance of power at the federal government level. And so without that additional infusion of cash coming from the federal government, the focus on local support is just becoming more and more important. So then as we look at San Jose specifically and sort of how we drive the South Bay economy, there's a whole number of different measures that I'm going to run through really quickly, but just to kind of set the tone, this is a percentage change in employment since the start of the year. And what you can see is the uneven distribution of the recovery across the economy. So this is employment across high-skilled jobs is our top line, which have largely recovered to within 3% of their levels at the start of the year. Our middle-skilled jobs, which have shown some recovery, but are still at a deficit compared to their start of the year. And then obviously those low-wage or part-time jobs that are still really struggling in a number of different sectors. So as we think about that, we've also tried to translate that into the sort of the way we're looking at businesses. And what we're seeing is that the economy is really sort of, or our work is really focused around three different segments. The first is really the stabilized economy. So those businesses that have successfully transitioned to remote work with limited or minimal impact. And then also sort of some of those businesses that have stayed open as essential businesses or have essential workers part of them. The next segment is really that holding on. So that's the consumer facing, really the Main Street businesses. They've seen a sharp reduction in spending by the public. And they're those types of businesses that really require that physical interaction with their customers. So retail and restaurant, entertainment and hospitality. So a lot of those businesses have tried to adapt and move on with the changing environment. And then lastly, the last segment is really those in crisis. So those businesses that have been forced to close and have largely remained closed, whether temporarily or permanently. And also those workers that have been dislocated through either reduced hours or through the loss of their employment. So I'm going to run through each of these again really quickly just to sort of show you how we're thinking about them and what we're looking at in the context of a recovery. So within our stabilized segment, what we're really looking for is those driving industries. So when you think about the San Jose economy, obviously the tech industries, which are represented by information, manufacturing, and then scientific and technical services to really dominate what's going on. So because of the picture on the national level, we're benefiting to some extent. We've seen a lot of employment stabilize through our tech sectors, and that drives a lot of the earnings and the sales and gross regional product that's moving through the region. What we tend to see is that real estate is a leading indicator on kind of what's going on in our submarkets and what's going on in our tech industry. What we know is that office is not doing well. So essentially, we're monitoring availability, which is pretty much on hold right now because most businesses are yet to make decisions on the future of their real estate until they can really understand the long-term impacts of the pandemic. But we're also monitoring the subleasing activity. So those businesses that have additional space that they're not currently using. And what we're seeing is indications that subleases are on the rise, which suggests that businesses are not looking to expand in the near term. What we're hearing sort of in the background from the brokerage community is that they don't expect office deals to really start until 2022. Our R&D facilities, which tend to be a little bit more stable because of the heavy amount of capital investment that goes in. There has been some activity, some new leasing, some releasing of spaces throughout the area. So we're still pretty bullish on that. And then industrial, mainly driven by e-commerce and warehouse distribution, remains incredibly strong throughout the city with very low vacancy rates. And obviously with the news from Amazon about looking at potentially new construction and new opportunities throughout the city, industrial will remain strong. I do have this slide, I'm going to skip over it fairly quickly, but just to sort of show you how we're comparing to other communities within the area on the sort of year-over-year change. And the chart on the left is very confusing because the numbers are technically the wrong way around. It's the dark blue is the 2020 numbers versus the lighter blue, which is the 19. But you'll see there's an increase in vacancy in the San Jose submarkets, but it's generally keeping pace with other parts of the region. And similarly, you can see kind of what's occurring in those three markets. The other indicator that we're really tracking from the stabilized segment is sales tax. So sales tax as it comes into the city is a representation of spending. You know, what we can see, and I apologize that this is a little bit of an eye test, but I'm going to just call out some of the key segments. So as we know, food products, transportation, and general retail are really taking a hit right now. And so we've seen a significant decline in the revenues associated with those. One of the positive notes is that the green line, if you can just see it, which is our business-to-business sales tax, has started to level off in Q2. So we're about to get our Q3 results to see how that is. But that's that strength of the tech sector and the B2B spending that's occurring. This bottom line down here, which is the sort of tan browny color we'll go for, that's our construction industry. And so what we can see is that that is cyclical year on year. And while it's sort of slowed and we're expecting those cycles to drag out a little bit, that we do think that that spending is returning, and there's a few key projects that are really driving that. So next I'm going to move into our holding on. So these are our consumer facing businesses, what we think of as our main street. A lot of our small businesses and mid-sized businesses kind of fit into this category. And really what's driving the situation for them is the amount of time that consumers are spending in businesses. So this is, we've been tracking a number of indicators through Opportunity Insights. So they have a whole economic tracker that's tracking the recovery in a number of different ways. I'll show you a couple of slides from this side. But what you can see is that overall, you know, people in San Jose are spending about a quarter less of the time outside of their home. But then when you look at sort of retail specifically, you know, it's even more. It's over 36% of their time. They're less than they're spending than they used to in retail. And again, workplace, because of the makeup of our economy, there's a lot of folks spending more time at home. So if you're a consumer-facing business, and especially if you're dependent on people that are at work and sort of buying a sandwich at lunch or coming to, you know, a retail outlet or a shop or something after they finish work or during their lunch hour, the idea that people are just not out there as much has a significant impact on your business. And you can see that when you look at consumer spending levels. But what's interesting here, so this is consumer spending for the MSA, which is down. It's not down as much as the time out, but what you can see is that retail is up. Now this means two things, and it's important for our local businesses and especially our small businesses. The first is obviously we're losing a considerable amount of retail sales to online. So people are shopping from home, getting goods delivered to the home, and that changes the nature of business for a lot of local businesses. The other is that there's trends that we're tending to see in retail that people are spending less time sort of going to different shops. So they will go into a single shop and do as much as they can in one visit to minimize their potential exposure and risk given the situation with the pandemic. So what that generally means is it's good for the big box stores, somebody like a Target, where you can get multiple different things, but it's really difficult on small business that sort of relies on that kind of browsing from shop to shop and sort of, you know, the more casual purchases that come through. And then what you can also see is just the decline in spending around restaurants and hotels. Obviously, our hospitality sector is taking a really significant hit through the pandemic. That, as we would expect, translates to the number of businesses open. One of the biggest challenges that we're facing is sort of the availability of information. So, you know, we've been asked a number of times to see, well, how many businesses throughout the city have closed? And the way that the city records business licenses and sort of tracks businesses, it doesn't actually give us really good information on when you close. It gives us great information on when you open or when you select a new location. But it's not true on the other side. And so, so we've been tracking, you know, a number of businesses open, as you can see across the board. There's about 40% less businesses open than there were in January. So, so that's definitely significant. The major areas where we've seen the decline is again in that sort of retail, hospitality, and entertainment. There are declines, obviously, as it relates to transportation, as people are moving around a lot less. And then lastly, sort of just following this same trend as you would expect with less businesses open, but also with reduced hours and reduced spending, is that the revenues around small business have been in sort of significant decline. And obviously the most alarming number there is that leisure and hospitality at more than 70% decline since the sort of middle of March. And whereas others have seen sort of some increases or some stabilization over time, that level has remained relatively flat. And as we think about this next wave of the pandemic, it's really just going to continue to compound those issues for businesses in that industry. So then the last segment is our in crisis segment. So here we're tracking the sort of rate of recovery in some of those sectors that that we were just highlighting. So you can see here, and there's a lot of data on this chart, so I apologize we won't be able to go in detail, but essentially what this is tracking is the percentage that an industry has recovered based on the job gains since February. So we took the initial losses early in the pandemic, and we're sort of tracking how well it's recovered over time. And what you can see is those key industries around sort of retail, wholesale, still have a long ways to go. You know, education and health services, actually my boxes are misaligned here. So it's actually leisure and hospitality, not necessarily the professional business services. But what you see in the education and health services, those tend to be those industries that are adjacent to hospitals, healthcare and schools. So whether it's personal caregivers or in-home caregivers, there's been a significant decline there. We did flag the manufacturing number. What you'll see is there's still sort of an 80% not recovered. But just given that the initial losses in February weren't as significant as a percentage of the total employment, you know, obviously we track manufacturing very closely, but we think it's still faring relatively well on the whole across the city. The other piece that we're really focused on is the UI and the PUA claims. So UI is unemployment insurance. So those people that have been dislocated from their employment and start claiming unemployment insurance. And then the PUA is the program that was set up for those folks that wouldn't normally be eligible for unemployment insurance. So after that initial spike early in the pandemic, things have generally leveled off. There is that sort of increase around the sort of late August, early September timeframe that we saw. That was actually due to processing challenges with EDD. So that's sort of rectified itself and evened out, but we're keeping a really close eye on this. So to the extent that we've seen the changes in the allowances for business openings as it relates to the state framework, obviously we're following this pretty closely. We think there may be impacts here to some workers in those consumer-facing businesses. As we think about the in crisis, we also just really want to focus on who within the city it's affecting, not just sort of the what. So we have been taking sort of equity into consideration and trying to understand where these impacts are occurring throughout the city. So as we think about those sectors that you just saw in a couple of those other slides that are most vulnerable and where the most vulnerable jobs are, you can see at the top it's really hospitality, retail, and healthcare. Down at the bottom, you can see those sort of professional services, business and financial operations. And while we can disaggregate this data by race and ethnicity on a sector level, that doesn't really tell you sort of who's being affected. What we find more of an effective tool is to actually look by occupation. So again, you can sort of relate the ethnic breakdown or the racial breakdown of those different occupations within those vulnerable sectors. And what you can see is there's a much more diverse workforce occurring in those most vulnerable sectors within the economy. And those populations are being impacted hardest by the employment loss. We also, took the time just to sort of compare this from a geographical standpoint. As you can see, the map on the left gives you the concentration of COVID cases. This has obviously been disclosed extensively through the EOC, that we know that different ethnicities within the city are being affected differently by the pandemic. But when you cross-reference that with the percent of resident workers that are employed in vulnerable occupations, there's obviously this direct parallel. So we need to sort of bear this in mind and continue to provide services in a variety of different ways to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all the populations within the city. So as we think about sort of all these different impacts at different levels, these different segments are creating sort of different needs and different impacts in different ways. So when we think about the stabilized, it's really up at that macro regional level. That holding on segment is all about sort of the visible impacts within neighborhoods and sort of closed businesses and how people sort of perceive their neighborhood business centers. And then lastly, in the in crisis segment, obviously that's a very personal and a very individual impact. But we also don't want to lose sight on the relationship between these different segments. And the reason we do that is because we know that stabilized economy is really what's driving a lot of the economic activity throughout the city. So in sort of conventional economic development theory, we talk about multipliers. And so for a typical tech job throughout the city, we think it's about a 1-to-5 ratio. This is sort of a commonly held understanding. So that for every tech job you have, it creates 5 more jobs downstream that are either in service, support, or a related field to that initial job. In a pre-pandemic condition, what we've known and what we've been looking at and sort of monitoring for some time is that the economic inequity throughout the city has been eroding that multiplier effect. And what that means is that we have this high concentration of high-skilled, high-wage jobs, and that increases the demand for housing, right? We've been dealing with the housing crisis for some time, but also the need for services, the need for amenities. And because there is increased demand, that results in increased cost. At the same time, those low-skilled, low-wage jobs that are downstream of that tech job have not kept pace with that increased cost of living. And so we've ultimately, excluded people from being able to access the economy successfully, and therefore eroded that multiplier to some degree. Now, what we know as we sort of sit in this mid-pandemic condition is that the conditions as a result of the shelter in place have amplified that impact. And the reason that that's occurring is because while the stabilized economy has allowed people to use technology to successfully sort of mitigate the impacts of not being able to go into the office, those same people require less services and less support. And what that means is there's reduced personal expenditure. We've seen it across the board from small business revenues and the result that had employment. So downstream, we still have some essential workers that are still required to support the resident population. We have some of those sort of holding on businesses that are still providing opportunities for people to get food, whether it's through takeout or limited opportunities for in-restaurant dining. But quite often those businesses are in reduced hours or have reduced income associated with it. And then obviously those workers that are in crisis that really have limited opportunity to work are really sort of not benefiting from the situation. So as we think about the impacts across the different segments, we're also thinking about ensuring that we're providing the service we need to those people that are most in need and sort of in crisis, but that we also need to get the broader economy going to try and redress that balance and bring more of that sort of that economic impact back, understanding that it will have sort of beneficial impact across the board. And then sort of lastly on the numbers, the last thing we're really tracking, and we think that this is important, but there's a lot of, there's not a lot of data to support it. So we're doing a lot of digging around this topic, is to understand what's going on with the workforce. So we obviously track unemployment very closely. Unemployment took a steep dive, early in the pandemic, other way, increased significantly and has been reducing over time. But what we also notice is that there's been a decline in our civilian labor force. And what that means is the people that are either employed or actively looking for work. And so the difference between sort of year over year, between September last year and September this year, is that there are over 30,000 workers that are no longer in our workforce. And when you adjust unemployment for that, the unemployment has certainly not dropped as significantly as the numbers would suggest. Now, there's a number of reasons we think this is occurring, whether it's folks that have left the workforce because of medical reasons, whether there's folks that are limited work opportunities because they're supporting other family members, whether through health issues or just having kids at home and they can't get to work. But we also believe there's some amount of out-migration occurring. We're doing some additional data digging to understand what that might look like, whether that's high-skilled employees for tech companies that have moved to other areas and can work remotely, whether that's families who have been excluded from economic opportunity and so are looking to relocate to other parts of the state or even the country. But we think that that's significant because what that means is on the long term we'll get a better understanding of what the recovery looks like. So as I said, we're doing some more work around that with a couple of new interesting data sources, so we'll hope to report back on that soon. So I'm going to close out just to talk about a little bit sort of how we're working and what our position is on sort of the recovery. This is a slide that we showed you back in May as we were starting to sort of formulate our plans sort of, post the initial shock. Obviously, there were these three key areas that started to align with kind of what we were seeing, that we needed to strengthen that foundation, that we were sort of providing stability, opportunity, and prosperity, but that we also needed to think about place really closely. We've continued to think about that and transition that thinking to align with what we've seen and kind of what we've presented on the data front, and try and create targeted solutions that address those impacts that are occurring at different levels. So obviously at the individual level, the work we're doing through the EOC to provide support and services to those most in need is forefront in our mind. We're really focused on the neighborhood level and how we build capacity and expand the sort of reach and infrastructure of services to small businesses. And then lastly, we're obviously working to continue to stabilize the local economy and focus on getting those employers back to work in their offices in a safe way that's consistent with the regulatory framework, understanding that that's going to help drive other parts of the economy as well. So I'm just going to flash through sort of what some of the specifics are looking like broken into those three segments. So on the individual level, obviously our workforce development team in Work to Future has already been doing a ton of work around, displaced workers and especially youth by offering paid work experience and internships and engaging employers around virtual job fairs and things like that. We're doing a lot of work on business education and guidance. So as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, you've seen us respond at times on a daily basis on changing nature of orders and what businesses can and can't do, and how we provide that information clearly in a way that they can understand and respond appropriately. And then lastly, on the individual sort of level is for those individual small business owners, the direct support that we've been offering through access to resources and supports, some of the grants we've been doing, and then obviously the tremendous work that Blog A has been leading around alfresco, allowing those businesses to open in a way that's consistent with the orders. At the neighborhood level, our focus has really been on building out a program that's been tied to the application we've made to the federal government through the EDA on capacity building. So, we have a relatively small team in economic development. We certainly don't have enough staff to get out there and talk to all 50,000 businesses every year. So what we need is more infrastructure and more support at the neighborhood business district level. So we're focusing on how we can provide resources and better information and access to support for those organizations so they can stand up over time and be a part of the team that's delivering service to small business in the neighborhoods. We're also focusing with our Office of Cultural Affairs to ensure that our nonprofit community and the arts community are really contributing to creating vibrant, great places in our neighborhood corridors. And then lastly, on the sort of citywide economic stabilization work, we're continuing our work with driving industries. A surprising amount of work is going on. That there are folks in the market that are looking to either consolidate, relocate, or figure out what their facility needs are. Manufacturing in the industrial segment continues to be an important driver for us. And then obviously development is a huge piece of what we do. So we're trying to work to translate those projects that have either started construction or are about to start construction to ensure that we can keep that process moving and we can ensure that the investment that can occur associated with those developments will occur, and then sort of lay the foundation for those sort of next series of projects as we really start to understand what's going on long term and start to see the recovery. And then the last segment relating to the previous item is we're working closely with Team San Jose to understand, the convention, tourism, and destination marketing perspective, to ensure that we remain a significant driver for major driving industries in sort of representing the city well and attracting that segment back, understanding that some of the impacts from an industry level have been hardest experienced by hotels and some of the businesses that are adjacent. So I apologize that that's a lot to digest in just a few minutes. We are bringing this presentation to the full council as part of the 3.1 presentation on December 8th. So hopefully we'll have some additional information and a little bit more time to dig in on some of it there. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
All right, and before we open it up for questions to my colleagues, I'm glad it's going to be coming under 3.1. So we'll have two bites at that apple. We'll go to public comment first, and we'll start with phone number 5140, and this is the Economic Recovery Work Plan.
Yeah, the question I have is, what are you guys going to do to really reopen this economy if the governor keeps, the color-coded health warnings going on back and forth, back and forth? How are these restaurants and hotels and businesses, how are they supposed to manage? How are they supposed to know what their inventory is supposed to be? You go someplace for a cup of coffee, it's a disaster. You got people working in these places, look like they're from outer space. I mean, who wants to go anywhere? I'd like to go to Europe or someplace. You can't go anywhere. Everything's closed. This is a worldwide shutdown. And I don't know what kind of economic development you're going to think you're going to get from the tech industry. It doesn't pay all the bills. And look at that downtown. You guys should be ashamed of yourselves. That downtown a year ago looked terrible. I went to go see the Mariachi Merry Christmas at the Hammer Theater. Wonderful show, by the way. Can't do it this year because of all the rules. But I walked around that downtown the day after Thanksgiving, and it looked like like the day after Detroit. That's what it looks like down there. And I can't imagine how you are ever going to recover that downtown. Ever, ever, ever. It's been under redevelopment for how many decades? They built the pavilion. They tore it down in 10 years, spent millions and millions of dollars. I'd like to know this English guy, what your plans are for the next 5 years, because this place is going down the tubes. I'm telling you. You guys need to get your act together down there, and it's not going to be for bike lanes and pedestrian friendly and all this stuff. You can't even park your car down there or drive. Who wants to go down there? The proof's in the pudding. Look at that place a year ago. Look at it now. Nothing's changed. I don't know if it's any worse or better. I just know there's a lot of new bike lanes and a lot more traffic tickets given by San Jose PD. With San Jose PD, you guys should be ashamed of yourselves.
Okay, Blair Beekman is next.
Hi. To first ask yourselves about the verbal report that you just approved a bit ago. Can there allowed public comment on the verbal report? That's a question to consider. For this item, to give my usual list, we're looking at a possible increase in deaths in the next few months, and we're kind of under, serious conditions again. It's very possible they're not going to open the schools in January, and the schools won't be open until fall. And these are all economic questions that you have to address and consider. And to respect the federal funding ideas that are possible and the state mechanisms and the state funding ideas and mechanisms that have been developing for over a year now with COVID. That's important stuff. And like what I'm going to mention in the next item, we came out with AB 3088 to really take care of housing issues, forgiveness issues, and for small businesses as well. But it was really short of what it was capable of doing. And Ash Kalra and David Chu in San Francisco, our assembly persons in Sacramento, who've been doing really good work to try, their darndest to just make a process open and understandable for people. And, a way that we can really have community harmony in the next few years until this COVID finally ends, which I think it can in a few years. But it really we have to trust people like Ash Kalra and David Chu and what they're really working towards and trying to accomplish at this time, towards really safe forgiveness practices for all of us and all sides of the issues. And that's important in this work you're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, we have Carl Davis Jr. on the line.
Johnny, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. We all can. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, Johnny, I don't normally attend these, but I really enjoyed Chris Burton's PowerPoint presentation. I would like to ask, is there a way that we can get that? I would like to share that with the Silicon Valley Coalition of Ethnic Chambers. I thought it was a lot of really good information. Number one, is that positive? Is that possible?
Well, technically, this is public comment, but yes, it absolutely could be possible. In fact, I think Chris could be made available to do the presentation himself if you were to ask him nicely. But
hey, Chris, I'm asking nicely. Okay.
Happy to do it.
Okay. All right. So I don't know how you can get my information. You want me to just say it now, or you get it from Johnny and those guys? I'm the president. I didn't introduce myself. First off, I think everybody knows me. Why do I do that? My name is Carl Davis Jr., and I'm the president of the Silicon Valley Black Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, Carl, our team has your details. We can follow up with you directly.
Okay, because I really love what you were talking about, creating target solutions and using, capacity building techniques for organizations like ours. Because you guys know that most of our Black business are in that crisis mode. So I'll stop right there because I'm waiting for the other agenda item, but I really enjoyed your presentation, Chris, and I wanted to just commend you on that. That was really nice. Thank you.
okay, and yes, I'll express the same thanks to you, Chris, and we'll go on to Councilmember Pam Foley.
Hi, Chris, thank you so much for that presentation. I looked at it originally over the weekend and it was a lot of numbers, but you were able to really articulate it well so that I understood it. But it hasn't alleviated my concerns about the crisis that our residents and small businesses are in particular. It's you really laid it out well. Those who are doing well, those who are holding on, and those who are in crisis. And as we've moved back into purple, we hear more and more from people who are heading into crisis, and it's just going to get worse. We know that rents aren't going to get paid. We know that mortgages aren't going to get paid. We know that evictions are going to start happening and foreclosures are going to start happening. I was happy to see in one of the reports that the small business moratorium eviction has been postponed or delayed until March 31st. I think that's good. But there's the economic impact. People really want to get back to work. And I don't know what we at the city can do to help them. I am a small business owner in the city of San Jose, so I receive your daily updates sometimes and weekly updates. It's really helpful for me because then I forward them on to my city council staff, and then we're able to push them out to our community. But it's what I'm very concerned about is it's the businesses that are doing well and those that are in crisis, but then how are we getting the words out? How are we supporting them? And these are not just businesses who are in what you have referred to as business districts. These are people who may be working out of their house, who are small businesses all over the city of San Jose. They're not in Willow Glen. They're not in downtown San Jose. They're in Cambrian. They're small businesses who don't have a traditional street or area that you would consider a business center or business district. So how do we support them? How do we get the word out? I see the loan opportunity that's available of up to 100,000, and that there's a webinar next week. I assume that state, I haven't looked into it yet. Maybe you could tell me a little bit more about that. Is that state funds or federal funds? And looks like it might be first come, first serve, going to be a difficult application process, but I'd certainly love to get that out to my community. So what can we do to support our community and get the word out about those funds, but also how else we can support them? Aside from, I'll share with you that every Saturday I do a small business shout out of a District 9 small business, and we depend on our D9 residents to tell us who to shout out, and they're kind of getting fatigued on telling us who we need to shout out. We almost need to do 2 or 3 a Saturday now, but we've been doing this since shelter in place to really just drive some business there as much as we could. And it's a very, very difficult time, and it's only getting worse as Alfresco now is shut down until at 10 o'clock instead of midnight in some places. That's a lot, so I'll give you time to respond, Chris.
Yeah, there's a lot there, Councilmember, but all sort of totally on point. So thanks for that. So just to start with the California Rebuilding Fund, that's a state loan program that just got launched on Friday. We are working to push that information out as widely as we can. It is, again, sort of as with all the state and federal programs, those applications can be time consuming and complex. So we're trying to build together as much guidance and advice as we can. And distribute that out. And you're absolutely right. Exploring and finding those new channels has been, one of our key activities throughout the pandemic. For the first time, we've had access to the all business mailing list through, the entire city database that comes in through the finance department on the business license tax. And so we've been sending out some of these business related e-blasts to every business that's registered within the city. Obviously, that only goes so far, right? Businesses, different business owners for different reasons, may not see that email, may not have regular access to, digital technologies, just may choose not to open it. So we know that we did get a pretty good open rate initially, up to sort of, I don't have the numbers on hand, but initially we were getting, a really good open rate from those emails. As you would imagine, that drops off over time. I think everybody's feeling the fatigue of information. So it's really about looking for those trusted intermediaries like yourself and your team, right? That when we create this content and push it out, that it can be amplified further. So we are focused on the sort of the neighborhood business districts because we think that there's sort of an underserved body of work there that we need to refocus on as economic development and sort of help stand up those organizations. But it's not just that, it is looking for all those other sort of avenues we can access to broadcast this information and ensure that people know that they have a resource at the city. And, of the sort of myriad of things going on and support that's available, we're a small drop in the bucket, but what we can be is a really good signpost to point people in the right direction.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that, and I find it helpful. I probably wouldn't have opened them either, except it's been on my radar since I think Kim told me that you send out these things to small businesses, and that was back in March. So when I started getting them, I realized, oh, I do get these. I do get this correspondence at on my other email address, my Foley MG email address. So, but I know I'm not the only one who's not opening them because those people, those businesses that are in crisis, they're in survival mode and they're not paying attention to anything from a bureaucracy like the city of San Jose. They think it might be us asking them for money to pay their business license tax. So have we seen a decrease in payment on business license tax? And I thought we passed paying or not imposing penalties for non-payment, but I would think that would be an indication of our businesses closing if they're not renewing their business license tax. Is that one of the ways we understand that number?
Yeah, there's a whole number of challenges around that number, and you're right, we did extend the amnesty around the business license, call it a business license. Oh no, it is a business license tax. I have to be careful with the terminology. I get told off by finance all the time. The challenge is the way that we sort of curate and collect that information at times. So for example, if you're an existing business in the city and you relocate to another location within the city, that kind of flags as a new business license over there, rather than we know it's the same business that has moved or not necessarily renewed. So it doesn't actually give us that insight or that opportunity. I think it's one of the hardest things to understand is what business closures have looked like. A lot of different people have opined, and the general perspective is that small business attrition could be somewhere between 30 and 50% in a nationwide basis. I think we're probably tracking with that to some extent. But again, we won't know the full extent of the impact on small business probably for a couple of years once we're done with the pandemic, right? The sort of the ripples and the impact will continue over time. But I think it just continues to be a point well made about exploring those ways in which we can reach out to those businesses and just be sure that they're aware of the resources that are there and available to them. To the extent that they are those businesses that don't tend to sort of pick up on the emails or follow us on social or read the blog, then it really does become all about those sort of trusted intermediaries. And it's not just business groups, it's community groups, it's other figures within the community that people look to or listen to, that we can just help amplify the message. Obviously, one of the challenges we face is there's a lot of information, right, across the board within our broader community and economic recovery task force around services to not just businesses, but also residents. And so making sure that as those messages go out, that they're clear and concise is absolutely a priority for us.
Yeah, it's really, I appreciate that. And we don't have a blank check that we can write a check to all the small business owners to keep them, to help them survive. You talked about retail being dramatically affected by delivery, online delivery, but that has been, and that's true. I know, I see that on my own personal behavior. I'm most of the time in my house. I rarely leave my house, sheltering in place constantly. But how much of that shift has occurred in relation to shelter in place? Because it really was happening before that. It was Amazon and delivery was already occurring. It's just been amped up by 1,000%. So do you have a read at all on if we remove the COVID piece of it, how much retail would be in jeopardy anyway?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and one that we've been wrestling with for some time, right? You'll recall that we brought forward the various different retail studies that we've been working on and sort of the retail strategy that we've focused. I think it is, it's a really important point to think about what the sort of the rebound will be. So absolutely, the sort of online transition is something that's been occurring, but it's certainly not been the sort of death knell to all retail. We've seen sort of the localization of some retail, especially around sort of small business, unique sort of things within, active communities that become sort of almost an amenity in their own right, as well as the sort of the major transitions and shifts that have occurred at the sort of big box level, but it's all still sort of persisted to some extent. And so definitely those transitions have been amplified as a result of COVID, and we would expect
Okay, I didn't know.
sort of bounce back to some
I
extent.
didn't know it was you on Thursday.
The question
but
will
I
be
decided on Thanksgiving.
what's left afterwards to kind of accept that bounce back, and sort of how long does it take? Because we're very much still in a mid-pandemic condition. We're not past this yet. Businesses are still restricted, right? Our retail operations are now restricted to 25% occupancy. And so we it's so hard to understand what that impact will be until those things are lifted completely.
Well, of course, Black Friday is coming up. That actually Black Friday's been extended for the whole week, but that's Friday. This Friday tends to be a make or break it for retailers, but I don't think it's going to make or break it for retailers this year. So I hope everyone goes out and shops, but then doesn't forget to shop locally from small businesses on Saturday, Small Business Saturday. And with that, I really appreciate the report. I know that, like I said, we don't have a blank check that we can write checks and help everybody out financially, but the expert support that we can give them is assistance, and anything that I know all of the council offices, I'm sure, are willing to push out any information that you have that would benefit our community. So with that, I will move acceptance of the report and cross-reference it to the December 8th council meeting. Is that the correct motion?
Actually, you can just move acceptance. You don't need to cross-reference it because we're planning to do it under 3.1, but thank you.
Oh, okay, then I will move the report, move acceptance.
Second.
And with that, I'm finished. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so I just want to remind my council colleagues that it's We have 3 items left, and we are already at past 3 o'clock. This item will be coming to the full city council on 3.1. So if we can save some of our questions till then, that'd be great, but ask away. I'm not trying to tell you what to do exactly, but just want to remind you there will be 2 bites at this apple. Councilmember Esparza.
Thank you, Chair. Since there will be a lot of other things on 3.1 and we're timed to 15 minutes, I think I'll use some of today's time to ask some of my questions. Thank you, Chris, for the PowerPoint that reflects different economic realities. There were there was a lot of information packed in that report. I noticed the slide that's mentioned that available space is growing. Has your office had a chance to sit down and strategize, particularly on vacant space and what strategies we could use as a city, seeing as this we're already seeing this trend of available space?
Yeah, so we stay pretty sort of closely in touch with the brokerage and developer community to understand sort of what that situation looks like. I think part of the challenge is we're still sort of in the middle of this situation, right? We're sort of not fully understanding the impacts on sort of workforce and workplace as it relates to.
Your office had a chance to sit down and strategize, particularly on.
So I think one of the things that we're doing is continuing that outreach to both the sort of corporate tenants to understand what their positioning looks like as they start to think about re-entry into the workplace, because that'll be the challenge, is whether or not people take less space as a result because they think that more of their workforce is going to be remote, or whether they need more space because they want to separate people out and further apart. So, you know, what we know is that everybody's just kind of hanging out until they can understand what the sort of change in orders will be and when that will likely occur. You know, as we start to look towards next year and hopefully towards a vaccine, hopefully that will start to sort of, you know, ease up some of the workplace restrictions and we'll get a better idea then. So we're kind of in this transition phase trying to understand sort of the market a little bit.
And are you looking at vacant commercial space as well and a strategy to deal with that?
Yeah, and so this is something that we've been looking at sort of pre-pandemic to some extent, right? As we think about different types of commercial space, especially retail strip centers, you know, large format or big box retail, as well as sort of different types of office. And so, you know, we definitely sort of have with owners. I think the sort of general consensus has been, let us knock it down and build something different. And usually it's residential. Obviously, we've been trying to preserve the opportunity for employment and commercial uses. But we sort of work with our counterparts in PBCE to understand kind of what's allowed in different areas, what's appropriate. So, you know, as we think about different types of space and the sort of interrelation between different uses, we want to make sure that we're not inadvertently precluding the use of spaces because we've kind of mingled things together. We've run into this issue in the past where, you know, you think that something is relatively innocuous, you make a minor change in the code, but it ultimately has this trickle down effect further down on a different business down the street related to that.
We're also creating more blight in an already blighted area, right? Like that's the other thing is so I'm interested in hearing some of those strategies. We've had some conversations offline about businesses leaving and then the kind of domino effect that can sometimes have, particularly in an area that is already struggling. And so it's a concern. And so I'd be interested in hearing in the future, what are some of the specific strategies you think we could employ as a city? I had another question on the displaced workers. You talked about worker displacement in the PowerPoint. And I don't know if this is a question for for Kim or Chris, but we do have some sectors that are doing great, right? We have some sectors that are very, very strong and other sectors that are suffering mightily. As we deal with that balance, how are we working with Work to Future or any other groups similarly to deal with the impacts of that and plan ahead to be able to invest in that workforce so that folks will be able to bounce back, as you will?
Yeah, and that's a totally great question. It's something that we're constantly sort of working with Work to Future around, because our most sort of successful opportunities are when we're engaging with employers to align, you know, the displaced workforce with the potential opportunities that exist in sectors that are taking off. So, you know, as you know, things like Amazon represent a near-term opportunity. Others include, you know, it's interesting, we've just had recent conversations with a major retailer in the city, not necessarily about on the shop floor retail jobs, but even in sort of remote customer service jobs. A food manufacturer that's opening up operations that's been trying to hire and been partnering with us. So, so that is something that traditionally we've always done to try to align, whether it's training dollars through the state or federally, with the employer and the displaced worker to kind of bring those things together to represent the opportunity. What we're finding right now, just through our outreach, and this is, you know, anecdotal, there's certainly no hard data behind this, is that there's still some resistance out there, right? Because of health concerns, because of, you know, everything going on with the pandemic, is that, you know, really good opportunities, it's still kind of hard to hire for, even when that sort of is out there. And so we're doing targeted outreach through Work to Future to, you know, potential employees, but we're still not seeing the kinds of numbers we would expect applying for those jobs, even on a sort of pre-pandemic condition. So again, I think we continue to be in this kind of slightly odd place where people, you know, either for whatever reason, whether it's, you know, personal circumstances at home, whether it's childcare, whether it's, you know, they're in a high risk category from a health perspective, you know, that there's still a portion of the resident population that, you know, are not getting access to that employment for whatever reason. And so we'll continue to require the whole host of services that are being provided.
Yeah, in particular, in your chart, like the hospitality industry, which has been hit so hard, a lot of very majority female jobs. And we've already seen a national record in the number of women leaving the workforce, huge, frightening numbers of women leaving the workforce because of childcare, school issues that were, you know, that many people are dealing with. And that's a kind of a commonality, whether you're an hourly worker or a partner at a law firm, we're seeing women leave the workforce overall. But again, so when I look at that hospitality number, have we reached out to them? Have we surveyed them? Because that's a lot of workers. And when we look at some of the other opportunities, like with Amazon, are we surveying them? Are we talking to them? Are we talking to their unions? How are we engaging with them to, one, learn what their concerns are, and two, see if we can get them trained?
Yeah, so there's definitely work in that area occurring. I sort of defer to Jeff, who's not here right now, unfortunately, but we can certainly do some direct follow-up just to see. But I know we're sort of looking for those partnerships with those types of organizations to ensure that as the opportunities arise, if we can do either some skill alignment or skill matching to ensure that we're helping those folks that have been displaced as a result of the pandemic find opportunities quickly that can help sustain them locally. But I think it's the right question. We can do some specific follow-up with Work to Future in partnership.
And it would be great if on December 8th, we could get some of that information, because
Sure.
I mean, I'll tell you, like, for my part, I know many of us are out in the community through lots of different things that we're doing because of COVID and the census and all of these other reasons why we're interacting with folks. And I myself have talked to a lot of these hospitality workers live in places like District 7, District 3, District 5. And so I think also just the path, I think being able to kind of, one, hear from them directly what the concern, what the barriers might be, or concerns and barriers. Part of it might be the path, and just know for ourselves as a city, that we need those people in our community, right? They're needed. And so even if we can't act on it now, that we can kind of develop some planning and know what the ramp would be to get people back working. If even if I mean, if they can't work tomorrow, then what would it take to provide that outreach and training to get folks from the hospitality industries, or get these, because we're going to have to do it sector by sector, actually probably deeper, to get people back working, because I think that's going to be next year. We're going to have to struggle to get those vaccinations out to folks, and then we're going to have to really focus on the economic recovery aspects of it. And then I wanted to ask one question about the property owners. Have we had conversations? You mentioned earlier that you talked a lot with the brokerage and developer communities. Are we talking with the property management companies and the property owners to talk about commercial rents and commercial rents, right? For all the businesses that are suffering right now. I know I've been talking to some small businesses, and I'm hearing not a lot of consistency.
Yeah, and that is the story of that, right? Not a lot of consistency. It's a constant challenge. So with the sort of larger centers, and within certain areas of the city, there are sort of ownership interests that are either bigger corporations or family interests that own multiple properties. But with the vast majority, especially those that are housing small businesses, they tend to be either individual owners, or it's been passed down through various different families or different partnerships. And so it's a really hard group for us to reach on a consistent basis. It's probably an area we should be sort of doing a little bit more work around on the commercial eviction side. And I know we've sort of tried to do some, but again, what you tend to find, especially when you've got fractured family ownership, is finding one person that can sort of consistently give you the information you're looking for across a whole sort of swath of the city is very difficult and very time consuming. We have been hearing sort of some feedback on the sort of larger side around, how some of the centers are trying to work with their tenants to ensure, because it's in their interest to ensure that, as things open up further, or as we get past this next wave, that they've got the tenants in place to ensure that those centers continue to be successful. So they are working with them on sort of rents and things. We've not heard much on the actual eviction moratorium and how that's having, whether or not that's having a direct impact on what that looks like. I think it's something that we've been looking around, but have yet to find kind of good, consistent information on.
Yeah, I think it would be great to provide some messaging. I'm hearing from some of the locally owned properties that house multiple small businesses, actually both in and out of my district, that the property owners or their management companies are reacting very differently. And I think maybe if we could also provide them some sort of basic information, because I do know that the family businesses often operate very differently from a brokerage, of course, right? And aren't looking at the kind of data that a brokerage would look at on a regular basis. I've also heard instances of the some companies starting to nickel and dime their tenants because to make up for rent on some of the other things. And so small businesses are just kind of feeling caught in the middle. But that's it for me. Thank you.
I will just say, Councilmember, you're absolutely right. And just anecdotally, and I will not attribute this to anybody, but what we've been hearing on the background is that actually the smaller business, the mom and pops, have been incredibly well behaved and working incredibly well with their property owners, and that it's generally the sort of chains and the bigger retailers that are sort of being less well behaved as it comes to their sort of rents and stuff. So I think the integrity of our small business community is significant, and I know they're working hard to make it work.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll go on to Councilmember Perales.
Thanks, Chair. And I know we're pressed on time a little bit today, so I'll keep my comments short, but I do want to echo what Councilmember Esparza was saying, and I do think having some of that specific data will help us as we move forward, especially if there will be policy decisions that we can make to try and better help our community out there that is the most impacted. And I do appreciate though the presentation. I do think it was very informative. I want to personally thank Nathan Donato Weinstein from your team for actually coming out, meeting with our Greater Downtown San Jose Economic Recovery Task Force. And we have a number of recommendations coming forward for, we have a number of recommendations coming forward, and we look forward obviously to being able to have some of those policy recommendations looked at by our Office of Economic Development again, and just the city in general. These were developed by over 50 small business or property owners in the greater downtown San Jose economic area, and spanning the different industries, some that are, they've been able to remote work, others that are still not open at all. And so really, I think the recommendations span the gamut. And so I look forward to working with you all as my office brings those forward again. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Perales. And Chris, my only question is, you talked a little bit about the exodus from San Jose, and I've actually heard it from California. I've even heard commercials now that are real estate or people are set up leaving California, realtors or movers or what have you. Is that by the time you bring it back to council, are you going to have kind of a better idea on the numbers of people and their skill level? Are they basically workforce teachers and the retail folks, or are they high paid executives? Is there, and how would you find that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been trying to be creative around how we access information, because typically in our world, data, factual data that comes from various different sources lags significantly, anywhere from 3 months to a couple of years. So it's really hard to get after some of these numbers. So we're using a combination of different things in a very creative way to get an understanding. It certainly won't be the full picture, but just to give you an example of some of the things that, obviously we're looking at things like residential vacancy rates across the different submarkets in the city to understand how that's impacting. Simple things like there's a couple of really good reports on U-Haul rentals right now. So it's about 4 times the cost to get a U-Haul from San Jose to Phoenix as it is to get it from Phoenix to San Jose right now. And that's because the algorithm that U-Haul uses is all about supply and demand, and all the vehicles are going in that direction and not coming towards us. And then lastly, there was a report that came out of San Francisco, a nonprofit group out of San Francisco, where they were working closely with the Postal Service to try and understand change of address information. And so we're trying to dig in and get access to some of that data as well. We hope to have some of it by the 8th, but I'm not going to promise, because trying to get information out of a government agency is never simple. But
yeah, no, I'm wondering. I know, statistics are hard to come by. That's why I was thinking, how could you measure that? And I've heard all kinds of anecdotal things. Like the high-paid people, or the our tax base is moving out of state because it's cost too much to live here now, or the middle class is leaving. I've heard that over and over again, but I have not I don't understand that is it reality, or is it is it people who have been displaced from service industry jobs, like in the hotel industry or something. It'd be interesting to find that out.
Right, and the challenge in that data is always that this is still a net attractor, right? We're still in an area that people still want to come to. So you never get that sort of complete picture, because whenever people are leaving, there's often sort of some amount of backfill that comes in on that as well. So it's we agree. We think it's an important point. We're going to continue to work around that, but it's definitely a tough one to get after.
Thank you, Chris. And now that we've talked about this, we're going to vote on the motion.
Just one quick question. Chair.
Sure, Councilmember. Yep.
Sorry, Chris, just one question on this. Do we have any indication of how many businesses in San Jose got a PPP loan?
We do have some information. We can provide that separately.
Yeah.
Our team actually put together a pretty good write-up on the sort of breakdown of data to understand what came through. So we can certainly provide that to the committee.
Yeah, if you could bring that back on December 8th. Just the issue, I think, is right now, I hear we're having issues with the issue of forgiveness. So now businesses are under this position of whether they want the loan forgive, because I think there's some downside to getting it forgive, something to do with tax write-offs. And so the decision is for them better. Is it better to take the tax write-off of the loss or to accept the loan, but then have to pay taxes on the value of it or something? So I'm just curious how much that impacts San Jose.
Yeah, so we definitely have some information on that. So Vic Farley on our team has been following all the programs really closely and has put together a couple of really good write-ups on sort of understanding that. So happy to provide those. We can include it in the 8th as well.
All right, thank you. That's all, Chair.
Okay. All right. If there's no more further questions, we'll take a roll call vote.
Esparza?
Yes.
Morales?
Aye.
Diep?
Aye.
Foley?
Aye.
Camus?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. On to item number 4. This is the affordable housing rent increases.
Hi, this is Jackie Morales-Friend. I am the Director of Housing, and we are sharing our screen now. We have a short presentation. I'm joined today by Tasha Matos, who's with our asset management team. She's the manager, and Chelsea Bass, who also works on our asset management team. And we're here today to provide you information regarding rent burden and how it impacts our affordable housing development portfolio. Next slide. On October 1st of 2019, the City Council approved the financing of the Markham Plaza 2 resyndication and rehabilitation. During the discussion of this item, Councilmember Esparza raised concerns regarding the rent burden associated with rent increases on tenants with limited fixed incomes in affordable housing developments. During that time, tenants also voiced concerns that annual rent increases exceeded the increases in the cost of living, especially for those tenants who are receiving Social Security or on other sources of fixed income. This resulted in a referral to CEDC, and so we're here today to share some of our initial research and our next steps. Next slide. So first of all, what do we mean by rent burdened? So in affordable housing, we typically say that if someone is paying 30% or less of their gross income towards rent, then that payment is affordable. So rent burden means that a household is spending over 30% of their income on rent. Severely rent burden means that a household is spending over 50% of their gross household income on rent. And so just to make sure everyone is clear, when we're talking gross household income, that's before taxes and any deductions are made. So today we're focusing on rent burdens that are in excess of 50%. And I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea.
Thank you, Jackie. This slide shows affordable rent increases from 2016 to 2020 within our affordable housing communities. From 2016 to 2019, the California Department of Housing and Community Development allowable income and rent limits increased between 23 and 31%. As you may know, AMI is the area median income, which is annually generated income derived from HUD. The bottom 4 lines of the graph represent our studio, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments at the 30% AMI level. The top 4 lines represent the same bedroom sizes at our 60%. You'll notice in those set-asides that there is a slight rent decrease in 2020, and that is due to the housing department making an adjustment to rent, our rent calculation. Hypothetically, back in 2016, Randy and his 2 daughters, for example, move into a 60% 2-bedroom apartment. At the time, Randy's income is $4,000 a month before taxes, and his rent is $1,508, which is roughly 38% of his pre-tax income. In 2017, he got a 5% raise, 3% in 2018, 3.5% 2019, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, he didn't receive a raise this year. Randy has been able to maintain his full-time status and is making $4,460 a month pre-tax, but his rent is now $1,911, representing 43% of his gross income. If we assume Randy is taking home 75% of his monthly income, after paying rent, he has $1,434 to pay for food, gas to get him to and from work, utilities, and childcare for his 2 young daughters. Moving forward, in the next 3 slides, we will show how rent burden affects different households and populations across a sample of affordable housing properties in our portfolio. Housing staff reviewed 9,889 affordable apartments, and we expected to see rent burden in excess of 30% due to the high cost of living in Silicon Valley. We found that 4,739 households paid less than 50% of their gross income towards rent. So Randy from our earlier slide is not considered severely rent burdened. 3,073 households, or 31%, have subsidy assistance, such as the Housing Choice Voucher or Project-Based Voucher. These restrict paid rent to 32% of their income, while the subsidizing agency pays the remainder of the rent. 2,087 households, or 21%, had rent burden of 50% or greater. And within that, 811 households, or 8%, had rent burden of 70% or greater. And as an example, in 2019, Talia and Genevieve were living in a 60% one-bedroom apartment, paying $1,647 in rent, which is better than the market rate apartments down the street, but they're still spending 56% of their combined $2,950 pre-tax monthly income. Again, if we assume that they're bringing home 75% of that, that leaves them with $566 a month for their other household expenses. Housing department staff further reviewed some of our most vulnerable populations within our affordable housing properties, such as seniors and our extremely low-income homes. When we reviewed senior apartments within our sample, we found that 28% of the households were not severely rent burdened, 44% had a subsidy, but unfortunately 28% were severely rent burdened and paying more than 50% of their income towards rent. More alarming is the 322, or 11%, that paid more than 70% of their income towards rent. We looked at how much it would cost to bring these households to a lower burden. For one of the 509 seniors who have rent burden between 50% and 70%, on average, to bring that rent burden down to 50% would cost $3,662 a year per household. To bring them down to being unburdened at $30,119 per household. For the 322 households who pay 70% or more towards their income towards rent, for their rent burden to be reduced just to 50% would be $858 a month, $10,293 a year per household. And to bring them down to 30%, on average, these households would need $2,196 per month, or $26,350 in additional income per year. That's almost $8.5 million a year just to bring these 322 households down to becoming unburdened by HUD standards. Our next slide reviews affordable housing developments at our 30% AMI or lower, which is also called ELI, extremely low income. We reviewed 1,610 households with a 30% or lower AMI. 599 were not severely rent burdened. 576 received some type of subsidy assistance. 27% were found to have a rent burden of 50% or greater. And 181 or 11% had rent burden of 70% or greater. It is important to remember that our extremely low income set-asides also receive the lowest amount of money and are among the most affected by rent burden. As an example, Ethel is receiving Social Security and she moved into a 30% studio in 2016. In 2016, her gross monthly benefit from Social Security is $1,000. Social Security also deducts $105 for her Medicare benefits, and her rent is $586. This allows her $309 a month for all of her other living expenses, and she spends 58.6% of her monthly income towards rent in 2017. By 2019, her monthly benefit has increased by 6.4% and is now $1,064 a month, but the Medicare benefit has also increased to $135. This means that she really only got a net increase of $34 over the last 3 years. The rent has also been allowed to increase in this time period by up to 31%, which would allow the rent to be $769. If her landlord decided to raise the rent to the $769 max, this would represent 76.9% of her monthly gross income and leave Ethel with only $160 a month to pay for her food, medical copays, gas for her cars, medications, and utilities. And then Jackie, I'll let you take it back from here.
Thank you. So in addition to the work that we saw and that we did, the team did, which we also got some feedback from Destination Home. Destination Home, as you know, oversees the majority of our homeless prevention dollars. Over the last few years, they've seen an increase in the number of households living in affordable housing developments seeking assistance from the homeless prevention system. From July 2019 to December 2019, Destination Home observed that approximately 19%, or 61 out of 327 households seeking emergency financial assistance and other support services lived in an affordable housing development. Most of these individuals were severely rent burdened, so again, paying more than 70% of their income towards rent, and unable to afford basic necessities despite living in deed-restricted apartments. The majority of these renters were seniors and extremely low-income households, which is consistent with the research that we found. Without the intervention of the homeless prevention system, they would have most likely lost their housing, leaving the most vulnerable families and individuals without any other options. As a partner in providing deeply affordable housing in San Jose, Destination Home has raised this issue and has indicated a desire to work collaboratively to explore solutions for the rent burden issue facing some of our residents who are living in our affordable housing. Next slide. And I'm sorry, I said severely rent was 70 and it's 50. I just wanted to correct that. In terms of our next steps, we have quite a few. So one is we're going to work with property managers, developers, tenants, and other stakeholders to craft solutions for rent burdened residents. These solutions have to balance the financial strain on rent burdened households with the needs of our developers to effectively operate and manage affordable housing developments. So we're planning on taking the following next steps. First, establishing a working group where we have asked volunteers to join so that we can evaluate challenges and potential policy options to address the rent burden issue. Second, we want to look and conduct an equity analysis regarding reviewing the data with a racial equity lens to see if there are any additional disparities that need to be addressed. Third, whatever solutions we come up with, we do have to be careful regarding the existing legal parameters that we have to follow because we have legal agreements with these developers. Fourth, we are going to continue to look at rent burden of existing residents, and we're going to calculate it and consider on a case-by-case basis when a developer is requesting a refinancing from the housing department. And again, often in those refinancing situations, a developer is pulling money out of the development, and we want to ensure that we've looked at rent burden and how to protect tenants who are still in the existing building. Fifth step is we're going to do continued ongoing monitoring. We're going to look at rent burden across the portfolio, and we'll determine on an annual basis if rent burden is growing. And then finally, we will come back with a Final report in the fall of 2021 will be returning to the Housing and Community Development Commission, and of course back to this committee, where we'll be presenting our findings and the results of our work that we've done collaboratively with property managers to negotiate solutions, and to what we found by monitoring the rent burden over the coming months. So again, you'll see us back in the fall of 2021, but we did want to share with you our initial findings as we start to launch this work. And with that, we are available for questions.
Thank you, Jackie and staff. Let me first go to the public, and we'll start with Michael Ferreira. Go ahead, Michael.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to phone number 5140.
Yeah, I'm wondering how 4 layers of government can't help subsidize all these people living. It has to do with cost of living here. And if you're not subsidized, you get to pay for everybody else on your utility bill, your gas bill, your cable bill, your cell phone bill. I mean, the people who are really being abused are the people who have to pay the full ride. And, you know, you get a utility bill for like $300. Here's all taxes and fees. And by the way, the utility here, I hope you guys can do something and talk with PG&E, because the power's gone out already at the beginning of a week or so ago. And you guys tax it, you participate with it. And I heard all these pie in the sky things with the utilities and what do you call it, microgrids. How are these going to help these people who don't have the money? You know, it's simple. They're going to have to move out of state or something, because if they're working and they have all this government assistance, where does it end? And now with COVID and everything, are these people going to be able to, are they going to lose their jobs? I mean, how many years are we going to have to pay for people who don't have things? It's terrible to say, but I mean, how much money do we as a taxpayer have to be on the hook for? And the people, like I say, the people who have to pay the full ride, which is me, how happy am I when I get my bills? How happy are you at the city council when you get your bills? You guys can't even handle a power bill at the convention center, which I don't even know. The convention centers can't even hold a large convention because the utility grid, the building doesn't work very well. One of the problems you guys have with that place. That's why everything goes to San Francisco. But yeah, I want to know. I want some answers of where this is going to end, and how 4 layers of government still can't help people who have to rely on them. Just goes to show you, no matter what, there's not enough money in the world to be able to live here unless it comes from offshore, and the people are engineers, electrical engineers with dual incomes.
Thank you. David Lowe.
Good afternoon, committee members. David Lowe speaking on behalf of Destination Home. I want to start by just saying thank you to Jackie and the team for the staff report and really their commitment to addressing what we see as a really, really serious issue. I don't think any of us are surprised by knowing that rent increases and rent burdens are something affecting our community, but it's particularly concerning to see it play out and the extent to which it's playing out in our affordable housing developments, which we all see as being designed to provide a stable and affordable housing environment for our lowest income residents. And so we at Destination Home have been looking at this issue for the past year or so as we've heard about it. You heard some of the data that Jackie presented from our homeless prevention system. Well, we were really shocked to see that there were about 20% of the folks who were receiving assistance who were living in affordable developments. And the reminder that our homeless prevention system isn't first come, first serve. It's not a lottery system. We're focused on serving the most vulnerable and the highest risk folks. So that's a really statement seeing of how close many of these people are to slipping into homelessness. And so for all those reasons, we are really glad to see the Housing Department tackling this issue. We're ready to stand here with you to help come up with solutions, because it's what's really needed to make sure we're taking care of our vulnerable seniors, extremely low-income residents, and make sure we're not exacerbating our homelessness crisis. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Blair Beekman.
Hi, thank you for this item. You know, I've been trying hard for the past few months to try to give what you can expect of COVID numbers, you know, and it's difficult sometimes to try to work out. Overall, my intention was to make a process easier for yourselves to talk about the issue and to talk about it with the public. It's been difficult for officials to actually give numbers, what we can be expecting as the public. And so that's what I've been trying to do. And it's been my understanding, you know, throughout the fall that there may be an expectation that even as we may get higher COVID numbers in the next 6 months, there's a chance that we can limit the death totals and keep the death totals down. And that's the goal. And I wish those things were explained more by our public officials, and it can give us good direction on how we can work as the public and with these housing issues. So just to simply try to clarify a bit from my previous statements, the work that Ash Kalra is doing and David Chu, their work that eventually became 3088 is going to be very much needed in the next year. And there's going to be a lot of issues that they're going to address. And what Jackie's talking about today is the complement to the funding ideas, basically. And, you know, the work she's doing on the ground, the day-to-day work, it's just nice to hear that, and how, you know, to coordinate how those things can work together. It's nice to hear. And, you know, good luck in those efforts, how to be open to federal and state funding issues in 2021. And thank you for the Alum Rock housing projects that are developing. I worry about the ideas of gentrification, but good luck in how we can all talk about the process in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, back to council. Councilmember Esparza is first.
Thank you. This is a great report. I mean, the information is great. The story is concerning, but this has some really valuable data in it. And we've had a number of conversations over about folks that are vulnerable. And often we think that if we can get someone placed in an affordable housing development, that sort of solves all the problems, but as we're seeing, it doesn't. And that one of the things that I found interesting was that looking at the ELI chart, that 38% were rent burdened. And I thought that the 19% of folks asking for assistance, for financial assistance, that 19% of them lived in affordable housing developments. Like, that's pretty massive. And that looking at the senior and the ELI charts, seeing the vulnerability in there, but then sort of seeing the apex of vulnerability when you combine seniors with extremely low income. I think we see that anecdotally a lot. I see that anecdotally when I walk through Markham Plaza or other places, and we hear the numbers of folks that are permanently housed and about the ages. But I think it's very powerful to see that here in this report. Who's sort of the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable. And I had a couple of questions. One, you mentioned in the work group around the financing, is the legal work group going to also do an analysis in terms of what our limits and possibilities are in terms of like joint power authorities and some things that we can advocate for as a city? Is that sort of being included as an option in the work? there you
Yeah,
go.
so everything is on the table now. So that feedback is really helpful to us. Is what I'm hearing you say is we should look very broadly and should look at whether if there's legislation or other solutions that are outside of the city's control that could help.
Yeah, absolutely. And also in terms of, often before us at City Council, it's different joint JPAs that are coming before us for these financing refi opportunities. And if that's one of the options on the table, I would like to know what we could do as a city or as a region or the League of California Cities, some different ways that we could lobby for some systemic improvements that include our city, but really include a lot more. I would really love to know that, and I'm happy to pitch in.
Yeah, I think that maybe that I didn't answer your question then correctly. So I think our initial work really focused on developments that have city subsidy in them, because those are the ones we have the most control over. There's a whole other group of affordable housing that we don't necessarily get reports from because they're not bound to necessarily release any information if we didn't issue the bonds. Those would be a completely different group of developers and issues. So I'll add that to the list to see what we can come up with to address that as well.
That would be really helpful, because so often affordable housing developments are this mix of different funds, and as the city, we often have the least amount of funds to give to a project. And so I would love to do that. Again, if our goal is to make some systemic changes, we're part of this issue now in front of us. So we're only a part of the solution. Hopefully, I know it's not a magic bullet, but hopefully there'll be some actionable items that we could do, both ourselves as a city, but ourselves as a community, as a county or region. I'm happy to do whatever I can. And the next thing, you referred to it in the report, but in reading it and hearing the presentation today, I'm very interested, given that this work started prior to COVID, what nexus are you seeing between this and what we're seeing with COVID, if any?
Well, I think, for most of the affordable, they have been very stable in terms of how COVID has impacted them. And many of the developers have said they're not increasing rents next year because they already know their tenants are challenged. And so, we would have expected to hear mostly from our affordable housing developers, but we haven't heard that the impact of COVID has been so great. And one of the reasons also is because they're one of the first to also do the referrals to the systems that we have in place, the rental assistance programs, because we educate people on those, they're on our lists, and so many of them do everything they can to help their tenants. I don't. Do you have you in asset management, Chelsea, or
I'd like to add, one of the things that we're going to find out is in the future, as soon as one of our monitoring cycles begins in 2021, generally around May, when we start to see some of the incoming budgets and net cash flows that come in, we can measure that piece a little bit better, and we can look at their operating budgets and we can see how they actually did. We did receive some information on some properties that had requested forbearance for the 2019 payments, but primarily they have all pretty much come in right now. Some paid half, and then they paid, and then they waited about 6 months, which the city allowed them to do. And so we have received those funds. It's really going to be, we're really going to see the data in the next 6 months on how that's looking.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thanks.
All right, great questions. On to Councilmember Perales.
All right, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just and recognizing the time as well, I just say to staff, I appreciate the update on this and look forward to the work coming forward. Certainly it's alarming, right, to all of us in regards to where the trends have been going. And even pre-COVID, right, we know that that has been the case. This has only exacerbated that problem. So I look forward to the work that you're engaging in and being able to see what we can do as a council to try and address this. Thanks.
Yeah, I also wanted to echo the work being done on this, but I was going to ask if any of the council colleagues can make a motion to accept the report.
Move to accept.
Second.
Second.
Okay, any further questions from my colleagues? Seeing no raised hands, I will ask for the roll call vote.
Esparza,
Yes.
Perales,
Having trouble unmuting? Aye.
thank you. Dieppe,
Aye.
Foley,
Aye.
Camus.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, on to item number 5, which is the electronic billboards item.
All right. Thank you. So my name is Martina Davis. I'm the supervising planner for our ordinance and policy team with the planning division, and I'm here to provide you with an update on our work on phase 2 of the electronic billboard priority. I'm going to namely update on the outcomes of our community outreach thus far. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, priority 3 is a broader priority to explore lifting the 1980s billboard ban to allow new electronic digital freeway facing billboards, as well as a number of opportunities for off-premise advertising within our downtown. It's broken down into 2 phases. Phase 1 being for city-owned sites that was approved by council in September of 2018. That phase is still in the implementation phase. The city has released 2 requests for proposals for billboard companies to propose signage on city-owned property, generally one being for the freeway-facing signage, the other one being for building-mounted signage downtown, and those are still under review. And then phase 2 is building on that work on phase 1. So it would be kind of taking that phase 1 criteria and applying it more broadly on non-city owned property. And just to share with you on the timing very briefly, the idea is that the phase 1 proposals would be before council. So council could actually look at what kind of signage we had received for city-owned property prior to bringing council a recommendation for phase 2. So next slide, please. So phase 2 of this work includes a number of specific components. For the freeway-facing billboards, we are looking at allowing freestanding programmable billboards citywide on sites that have an existing non-programmable billboard. This would be specific to freeway frontage. It would allow a replacement of an existing static billboard with a digital billboard, as well as allowing new digital billboard locations within the North San Jose policy area. These would both be at a required 4-to-1 replacement ratio. So 4 billboards would come down for 1 new digital billboard being installed. We're also looking at signage downtown. So in addition to building mounted programmable signage on private property, we are looking at also allowing advertisement on public amenities and within the public right of way. So that could include street furniture, bathrooms, wayfinding kiosks, and that kind of thing. And then, and that signage would not have the replacement ratio consistent with phase 1 is what we're analyzing. And then based on council direction, we are also analyzing modifying the illumination parameters and restrictions for the signs. This more has to do with a requirement that the signs be tilted a certain direction to mitigate the light impacts council asked us to explore allowing use of alternative technology for that light mitigation. And then we are also analyzing allowing the signs to begin operation at 5 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. For phase 1, policy requires that the signs be turned off until 6 a.m. So council asked us to explore an hour earlier. I'm going to touch on 2 changes to our scope from last time we talked to you. This summer, we actually received a request from the Valley Transportation Authority to remove digital signage on transit facilities from the scope. Originally, that was part of the scope, but VTA staff shared with us that there just is not opportunity for that in the near-term future as far as they're seeing, and they prefer to not have that conversation right now and explore it at a later date. They said more specifically kind of when foot traffic downtown increases, generally more when BART gets here. And then the second bullet addresses a specific item added by council as part of the phase 1 approval. The direction was to expand the definition of city-owned property to include remnant public right-of-way. I'll note that, you know, the definition of city property in phase 1, it didn't exclude remnant right-of-way. So we really kind of took this to mean, you know, take another look and make sure that our criteria really is hitting all of the eligible city-owned property first. And so we did take another look at that. We don't believe that expanding the definition specifically within the phase 1 policy would result in additional signage. The request for proposal, one of them for phase 1 allows sign companies to propose signs that are on city property that we had not specifically identified in our work as phase 1. So this is all to just say, you know, the idea is we want to capture all of the city land in phase 1, and we don't think that an amendment to the phase 1 policy as part of phase 2 would capture any additional city-owned land. And as I said before, the phase 1 request for proposal would be before council before the phase 2 recommendation would be. Next slide, please. So just want to briefly touch on what we're analyzing. Again, building on phase 1, you know, the world of city-owned property is much or smaller than the world of private property in our city. So, and then the other thing with the city-owned property is we ultimately have control. We still have a second step where we get to choose what signs we want on our property, specifically the council does. And we don't have quite that same level of control with the phase 2. So, you know, it's a little bit more analysis than in phase 1 to expand our criteria and make sure that we're setting up a program and a recommendation to council that would work, particularly around the downtown signage. For example, we have 2 National Register historic districts downtown. Want to make sure we're not setting up a program that would have an inherent conflict with preservation policies and that kind of thing. Next slide. So I do want to touch in a little bit more detail on the state and federal regulations, because I think that these are going to be what are going to be most impactful on our recommendations that we are not in control of. So, you know, we can't control what the state law says. It says what it says. So in California, outdoor advertising within 660 feet of a highway is regulated by the Outdoor Advertising Act. And when we say highways, you know, of course, we think the obvious freeways, 87, 280, et cetera. And within those freeways, there are different designations that mean different things. The other thing, though, to note is that it also includes principal arterial streets, which are streets that are designated under the Federal Highway Act, and that includes certain surface streets downtown. So I'm going to show you where those are in a second. But I do want that to be clear that it isn't just the freeway fronting billboards that are restricted by state law. It is, in fact, even the ones on the surface streets. So if I could have the next slide. And this is just to show you very briefly, here's our kind of what the lay of the land we're dealing with. Like, for example, all these really light streets, the light blue, those are surface streets that are designated as arterials. You can see we have a number of different designations on our freeways that we're working through. And right now we're really focusing our analysis on making sure we identify all of the eligible sites for purposes of our environmental clearance and really public disclosure and kind of the world that we're looking at with this recommendation. Next slide, please. And then this one, this was when we prepared for phase one. So you can see the phase one city-owned downtown sites highlighted. But what I want you to focus on with this slide is those light blue streets. Those are the streets that are designated as primary principal arterials downtown. So that would be Santa Clara Street, east of Autumn, the whole thing. All of North First Street, Market Street between Santa Clara and San Carlos east or west of Market, and then you see a little dog leg. That's actually where the Greyhound buses used to go to the Greyhound station. So that's how I got that designation, if you're curious. It seems a little weird. I did look that up. So I'm bringing this up just to give you guys a heads up that, again, the Outdoor Advertising Act does have limitations on placement, size, distance between signs, prohibitions on signs in the right of way of these roadways. So there are a number of constraints that we are working through. The other thing that's, frankly, kind of torturing me is that these laws were actually written for freeways, and it wasn't until a few years ago that it got expanded onto public roads. And so it's kind of difficult to apply something written for a freeway to public roads. And I'll just give you an example. There's a 1,000-foot distance requirement between signs on the same side of the highway, which makes sense if you're looking at freeways where different traffic's going different ways. But when you're looking at surface streets, that means on the same side of the street. For the numbered street, that's about 3 blocks away, but they can be across the street from each other, it appears. So we're trying to figure all of that out and make sure that we're identifying and analyzing all of the appropriate sites and everywhere that applies. But I will say probably the Outdoor Advertising Act is going to be the biggest limiting factor as to what could be allowed specifically within the downtown. So next slide. All right. What I want to focus on now, and this is going to be kind of the last thing, is what we've heard from our community outreach. And I'll say just as an overarching statement that this is very different from phase one. Phase one, we didn't seem to have a large participation from the broader public. And that's not the case here with phase two. We are getting a lot more interest, a lot more input, and it is almost entirely negative. We're getting a lot of opposition on this project, and it's not the same conversation as it was with the phase one work. So I just want to throw that out there. We originally planned to have our outreach in March. So we were issuing the notice of preparation in early March. We had the community meeting scheduled for late March, and then we all know what happened in March. So we put that on hold, we regrouped, and we held our meetings in July. We had a community and scoping meeting, and then followed that with a number of focus groups where we could get into some of the more specifics based on the topics. All of these were virtual. They were all open to the public. And we are planning to do another set of outreach when we have a little bit more of the analysis done. We're planning it for December. When I wrote the slideshow, it was December, but when we started putting that on the calendar, we realized the holidays are coming very quickly. So we will likely have the community outreach, the next set of it, first thing in the new year. I'll note one thing that we heard very loudly from the community is they wanted the council to be able to hear from the most people possible. And so people suggested we do some sort of an online opinion survey. We thought that was a great idea. So we are working on that, and we were likely to have that launch first thing in the new year. Next slide. And to summarize what we're hearing specifically from the community feedback, we are hearing some specific concerns around traffic and pedestrian safety. Obviously, pedestrian safely more downtown than the freeways, and then traffic safety all around. We are hearing concerns about loss of dark sky, environmental impacts, impacts to wildlife and sleep cycles. And then we are just hearing an overall opposition. A lot of people just simply don't like digital billboards. We're hearing that people don't feel that this phase two work has any benefits to the city, that this is not something we should be working on right now, wherever, from a lot of people. We're hearing people want to keep the billboard ban. And we've heard a lot of, I guess I'll say opposition or, objection to the 4-to-1 ratio. We're hearing it should go up to at least 10-to-1. So that kind of summarizes what we're hearing. I know that you got a couple letters to the committee today as well. Those are also a pretty good summary of the type of stuff that staff is hearing a lot of. So I will finish with our next steps. As I said, we'll be doing additional outreach, probably not December, but January. We are targeting the first quarter for releasing our environmental impact report for the circulation period. We do expect a lot of comments on that. And then that would bring us to a spring 2021 council and planning commission hearings. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. We'll first go to the public comment, and we'll start with phone number 5140. And this is on billboards.
Yeah, I can't wait to see a tackier downtown with blinking lights. Maybe it'll look like Reno or Vegas, or worse yet, Times Square. Who's going to be looking at these billboards anyway? That's how the revenue is based on foot traffic and eyeballs. Who's going to be down there besides some junkie shooting heroin or a bum crapping in the street? Who's going to be looking at the ads? I mean, what are the ads going to be? Like for bleach or something to clean your heroin needles with, or you know, what prescription drugs you can take? What are you guys going to advertise on these billboards? Or are they going to be propaganda billboards telling you to wear a mask or telling you to stay 6 feet apart? What's it going to be? I'd like to know what these blinking bright light signs are going to. What are they going to be broadcasting? Public or private advertising? I have no idea. I just know that in the end, I want you guys to do it so you can make San Jose even look worse. And you will. You guys will do it. And it'll look terrible. And it'll be an eyesore. But really, who cares? Because who goes down there anyway? Because it's a failed city. It's a failed downtown. You guys have spent millions, tens of millions of dollars over the last, I don't know how many decades. And look at that place. It's a joke. And now you want to make it look like Times Square. You know what? If you're going to make it like Times Square, do it like in the 70s. Have peep shows and junkies and strip clubs and porno. Have all that down there with a bright light. That's what you guys need to do in San Jose. Yeah, that's what you guys need. You guys need it to be more tacky and more crappy than it already is. I look forward to seeing. I want you guys to answer me. What's going to be broadcast on these billboards? Probably propaganda from this terrible city council.
Okay, Les Levitt is next to speak. Les, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Oh, yes, thank you for your patience. I want to go back 35 years and suggest DB2 and take a serious look at why San Jose took a stand against.
We're having huge amounts of problem hearing you. I know you're blowing out my ears.
Better at this point?
Not much. I don't know if anybody else is.
Yeah, Chair, I'm having the same issue as you're having.
Yeah, Les, I don't know that maybe you can dial in again. I'll call on you again. We'll go to May Pizzo.
Hi, my name is Mary Pizzo. I'm a resident of North Willow Glen. I'm concerned that the presentation doesn't accurately portray electronic billboards. Only slide 4 had an electronic billboard, and I don't think it's really reflecting the type of signage that is typically built alongside freeways. I'm also concerned that electronic billboards don't support San Jose's goal for energy conservation or pedestrian safety. They do provide a huge distraction, and I'm very troubled by that. I'm also concerned that especially along private property, they will remove trees and shrubs so that the signage is visible to drivers as opposed to respecting the walkable neighborhoods that we're trying to create. And I would like to also say that the idea of a 4-to-1 ratio is nowhere near appropriate. I'm concerned that the neighborhoods that will benefit from having the removal of passive billboards are not going to be the neighborhoods that end up with these electronic billboards. And so I'd like to see in a future presentation a commitment by the committee to ensure that the removal of billboards, should this go ahead, is directly in the same area that the electronic billboard is being installed, so that the neighborhood is at least benefiting from the removal of passive signage.
Okay. I don't know. It sounds like Les is still having trouble with his microphone. We'll go on to 13th Street NAC.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Craig Chivatero. I'm the president of the 13th Street NAC. It's 501c3, representing 5 neighborhood associations and several community and neighborhood or friends groups in District 3. I think approaching the beginning of phase 2 here for the billboard changes just came to my attention recently. And I have to say I'm appalled that this topic remains priority number 3 on the list of priorities for San Jose City Council. It seems it's hard to believe that this could rate that high as a priority, given all the other challenges that the city is facing, as we've seen with some of the other topics that were presented today. I'm canvassing my members to see if they, see what their opinions are, but I have yet to encounter a single person or organization who's in favor of changing the ban. We don't want more billboards, and we certainly don't want digital billboards. At least that's my understanding based on the people I'm dealing with. I think at a minimum, phase 1 results need to be assessed and the local concerns addressed before anything like a phase 2 is entertained, let alone actually implemented. I think an objective assessment would result in rejection of proceeding with lifting the ban or significantly altering it. And I hope the city council recognizes that when the time to vote on this comes before them. Thank you.
Okay, it sounds like Les is Les, you want to try it one more time?
Hello.
Your microphone is extremely noisy. Can you hang up and try it again, Les?
Number to call.
I don't know, Tony. Can you just call the same number and try it again? Maybe it's the connection. We'll go to Dave Pochel.
Hey, good afternoon. In reconciling the most urgent and highest priority issues with your resource limitations during this pandemic and for the following economic recovery, please recommend that staff abandon this electronic billboards phase 2 work immediately. As staff mentioned, of the community members and stakeholders who participated in the focus group public meetings, none supported this. The more people find out about this, the greater opposition there will be, especially when they find out that the city will receive exactly no revenue for investing their limited staff resources on this. I think this could become an albatross around your neck that is advertised in bright electronic billboards. It is understandable, to think that a reduced number of billboards is reasonable to approach, to the complaints about the billboards, but allowing bright lights is only going to make the matter much worse. And there are very real impacts of increased accidents, disruption to wildlife and humans alike. Excessive exposure to artificial light has been linked to increased risk of breast and prostate cancer, obesity, diabetes, depression, bipolar disorder, and more. We are already struggling to deal with too much artificial light in our lives from too many sources, which is disrupting our sleep. Please prioritize the work of the city staff on more productive and critical areas so that we can all get a good night's rest. Thank you. And my special thank you to my council member, Johnny Camus, for his dedicated service to our district and city. You know, Johnny and I don't always agree, but he has always had an open door to me and an open ear. He's always conducted himself with the utmost integrity and desire to do what he thinks is in the best interest of his constituents. All in detail, thank you very much, Councilmember Camus, for your service.
Thank you. As much as I didn't want to cut you off, your time is up. Let me go to Les Levitt one more time. Let's see if this microphone is working. I don't think that you actually hung up and tried again, but we'll try you. You're extremely hard to. No, it's not working. I would say update your software. There's something really wrong. No, we can't really listen to you. I'm sorry. Linda Rutherford. Sorry, Ruthnoff.
Hi, this is Linda Ruthruff, and I am, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I am a San Jose resident. I live in District 1. It's clear to me that this issue was prioritized pre-COVID. Right now, the world, our country, and our city are facing huge challenges with COVID and the economy tanking. We have life and death issues regarding the health of our people and our economy. I think it is silly to have this as a priority, and I think that staff time could be so much better spent on things that really matter right now. But let's say this discussion goes forward. There's no upside to these lighted and programmable billboards. They distract drivers. There's all kinds of research about that they cause accidents. They interfere with bird migration. Again, a lot of research. And there are massive additional impacts to plants and animals. For example, night lighting causes flowers to open at the wrong time, and then they don't coordinate with the insect pollinators that they've evolved with. It disrupts our circadian rhythms and release of hormones. And there's just no benefit to our city. I'm baffled as to where the impetus for this is coming from, because there is no discernible benefit to the city, which Mayor Sam Liccardo keeps saying. So I urge you to drop this and have staff spend time on things that really matter. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, our next speaker is Michael Ferreira.
Thank you, Councilmember Camus and other committee members. I am currently the political chair for this Sierra Club Loma Prieta chapter, and we've already addressed this in a letter to you that was signed by Katya Irvin, our water committee chair. And I just have to say that Dave Poschel's remarks and Ms. Ruth Ruff's remarks really do kind of mirror my own surprise that this is a priority for the city of San Jose. And in the interest of time, I will just say that I really think the recommendation to deprioritize this as soon as possible is the best outcome of this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Shani Kleinhausen. Sorry.
Good afternoon, Chair Camus and committee members. My name is Shani Kleinhaus. I'm the environmental advocate for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, and I hope you had a chance to read the letter that Sierra Club and Audubon sent you last night. in which we asked you to stop or to recommend an immediate end to the electronic billboard phase 2 project. I have been to so many public meetings in San Jose over the past decades, and I cannot remember a topic that is more abhorrent to the community at large. I talked to many community members over the past few months. The first response is surprise as to the motivation for the project. The second one, when I explain about the 4 signs for 1 and so on, the response is anger and frustration. People want this stopped. Not only that, they want phase 1 reversed. People want the existing signs removed, but they don't want more glaring electronic signs instead. They don't want advertising for casinos and liquor, political ads, or ambulance chasers, like the sign that Katya took a picture of and is in our letter. They want a good night's sleep. They want the animals to not be disturbed by light. They don't want that disruption. The existing sign and billboards impose aesthetic blight. They're ugly. But the proposed replacement by electronic signs, that's hazardous to safety, health, and the environment. It's not apples to apples. It's not even apples to oranges. It's more like comparing an unsightly, dried old shrub to poison oak in full bloom. This project brings no benefits to the community, only costs and hazards. At the earliest possible time, possibly tonight or this evening, please stop this project and direct resources instead of being spent on surveys and EIRs and other planning processes. Let planning staff focus on urgent issues during those challenging times. We heard a lot of those tonight or this evening. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Our next speaker is John Miller.
Yes, the planning department estimated in 1985 that there were 600 existing billboards in San Jose. In 2017, the billboard lobby proposed taking down the blighted conventional billboards for being able to put up more profitable but equally blighted digital billboards. The council accepted the deal, but knew that an actual count of the existing billboards had never been done, only an estimate. If their main argument to justify digitals was the removal of conventional billboards, how could that arrangement be evaluated unless the number of existing conventional billboards was known? The planning department in 2017 recommended a replacement ratio of 10 conventional billboards for every 1 digital billboard erected. They did so because they believed the estimate of 600 billboards was low. Their replacement ratio recommendation should have motivated the council to either accept that 10-to-1 ratio or demand a count. The council did neither. Instead, it adopted the current 4-to-1 replacement ratio. This means even if only half of the 112 digitals permitted under phase 1 and phase 2 were actually erected, at least 376 conventional billboards would remain. The billboard companies get to keep their money-making conventional billboards and have more profitable digitals too. Thank you very much, City Council. This whole process needs to stop. It is a waste of taxpayer money. Drop phase 2, rescind phase 1, and reinstate the 1985 ban on new billboards. Thank you.
Hey, I think Les is on a different computer. Can you unmute yourself, Les?
Yes, thanks for your patience with me. Okay, I want to go back 35 years and suggest you do too, and take a serious look at why San Jose took a stand against billboards at that time. First, the city banned billboards on city property in 1972, and then in '85, they banned new billboards citywide. So here are a few quotes from that time from a Mercury News article. The first one is from Gary Schoenauer, who was planning director at that time for many years, as you probably know. And he said, the ban is an expression of a very strong commitment on the part of the city council to beautify the city. And this article goes on to say, planning department officials say the ordinance is designed to encourage the revitalization of downtown and major thoroughfares. At that time, the Planning Commission did a 3-year study, and they determined that an abundance of billboards is, quote, visual blight. City officials said reducing the kind of conspicuous advertising will improve the overall appearance of the city, and this in turn will encourage economic development. Encourage economic development by not having billboards. What was good for the environment in 1985 is still good today. What was bad is still bad, but in 2020, the city seems to be saying the opposite of what they did in 1985. And quite simply, the only people who will benefit from large electronic billboards are the billboard companies and their national advertisers. We know that lobbyists for the billboard companies met more than 50 times with city staff and council members well before the public was broadly aware of any of this. When the city finally did some outreach over the summer, the input from everyday citizens was overwhelmingly against lifting the ban. You have that summary. So like others, I'm saying pull the plug on this, stop all of this, no more phase 1 billboards and no phase 2 at all. And don't start thinking about a compromise. A ban is a ban. A deal with billboard companies that's not in the public interest, no matter how watered down, is still an affront to the environment and a bad deal for our city.
Okay, that was the last speaker on public comment, and we'll now go to council deliberations, starting with Councilmember Perales.
Thanks, Chair. And appreciate where we're at in the process here. I'm actually glad that Les was able to jump onto another computer because it was it was very difficult to be able to hear him on the first device there. And thanks staff for bringing us up to speed where we're at. A couple questions based on some of the comments that we're hearing today. And the first one that comes to mind, and this actually, we had a presentation from City Manager Dave Sykes last week talking about the city's current workload, priorities, and sort of the process that he went through and that all of our city departments went through to go and reassess, sort of what we're working on. Obviously, during the pandemic right now, priorities have shifted, and this obviously did remain, and that I think certainly raised a couple eyebrows last week as well. I wanted to see if staff could help to describe why maybe in the analysis that the city manager's office went through, that this work did indeed sort of during the time that we're in the pandemic, because I don't think anybody can argue that somehow, right, this would be a thing that you would pick out of a hat and say, hey, let's work on this right now. But describe why is it that this remained on the list as something to continue to work on right now?
Thank you, Councilmember Perales. Rosalind Huey, Director of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement. And very good question. One of the key reasons that this item has remained on the council's priority list is because, number one, staff has been working on the item for quite some time, over 2 years now, and we've made substantial progress, as you're aware. We're very close to completing the RFQ process and RFP process for phase 1. And I know that Blog A is on the line and can give you an update on that work. And also earlier this year, we had started the environmental analysis for phase 2. And that environmental analysis really is the core component of phase 2. We know it's going to take the most amount of time, as well as conducting the community outreach, which you've heard a lot about this afternoon. So for those reasons, because we had made substantial progress and in an effort to finish the work on this council priority, it did remain.
And safe to say that if we were to have stopped some point, if staff had decided on their own earlier this year to put a pause, because we were in the middle of the CEQA process, or if we were to stop now, what would that actually do? Where would that kind of set us back to, and what kind of work that we've already completed or in the middle of would be undone or would be for naught, and then we'd have to sort of go back and rehash all that again?
Well, in terms of the environmental impact report for phase 2, as we said, that work is underway. We had resources assigned to it. So if council directed us to stop the work, that work would just stop. Obviously, the staff who are currently assigned to this priority item could work on other priority items or other items in the citywide planning division work plan. Concerning
I guess
phase,
I'm curious, like what would happen to it though? Would that work be put on pause, or and could it just be picked back up a year from now, or is there a statute of limitations on CEQA work? I don't know, so I'm just kind of curious what could actually happen to that.
yeah, so depending upon how long the pause would be, there could be implications for the environmental work. It might have to be updated, for example, which would cost the city more money, obviously. So it would just depend upon how long the city council would want to put the pause on the work. And I'll ask Martina if you wanted to add anything in addition to that, anything I'm forgetting?
Yeah, I mean, I do think to a certain extent, a lot of it is, I guess I'll say static. I think of static billboards, but there are certain things that don't change. Certain things would need to be refreshed. We would need to look at, if there's any new literature. So, but for example, traffic impacts, I'm not sure that would change, right? I think that's something that analysis could be put on hold and, brought back up. There are some things that might change if there's regulatory changes or changes in state laws around signage. That actually could go either way too. It could be in favor, it could be not. So it's all to say, I think it's a mixed bag.
Okay, and then going back to Rosalind, what you were saying initially, I think the biggest reason as to why this work kind of remains on the list is because we are in the middle of it. Right, sort of. It's not only are we in the middle of the CEQA analysis, but it is a couple years in, and obviously it was something that was prioritized a few years ago, and so it's at the sort of the end of this phase 2, which is the last phase, and as that, again, I don't know, I didn't do the factoring in that the city manager's team did, but I'm based on what I'm hearing here and what I'm aware of, it sounds to me like that's what allowed this to remain on the list as part of the priority work plan that we're currently on.
Yeah, this is Kim. I was part of those conversations, and I would definitely concur. And a key question is the work substantially done such that it could be completed this fiscal year and brought to council for a decision. And just for everybody's benefit, council will decide, and there are different elements of this. The one the community has spoken of most frequently is the freeway facing signage, right? And the potential for electronic billboards. The other part is the potential for building mounted signage in the downtown on private property. The third one is very interesting I think to us as staff, because it's about the right of way downtown and potentially allowing advertisements on like the public toilets, wayfinding system, news racks. That would be a way to finance those kinds of improvements. So there's different elements to this, and when this gets brought forward to council, you could decide which elements you wanted to move forward and which you didn't.
Thank you for that, Kim, and I do recall seeing that in the presentation last week, the sort of the distinguishing difference between work that's going on, but then work that was significantly, sort of near completion. So then that way it's obviously to leave at that point it has a different impact. I appreciate that. And in regards to some of the concerns, I actually would agree personally with where the city, took a direction back in the 80s, which was to put a ban. I don't think there's was much value then nor now to add more of the same kind of billboards that we see all throughout the city. That and I don't know if we do have a better estimate now. I know that it's come up. Do we have a better estimate on how many paper billboards we do have in the city? 600 plus, I know, is what was thrown out there.
I'm just like looking that up right now. There is a difference between how many are existing and how many are legal. So that's one of the things that makes it a little bit hard to give a hard and fast number, because we could theoretically drive every street and find billboards, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're legal. Right now, when we're talking kind of the larger billboards, our estimate is about 300, and then there are more that are the smaller kind of building mounted one tucked away in neighborhoods. So our estimate right now is at the 4-to-1, it would be about 75 new billboards if all of them were removed. But again, that's estimates, and again, largely it's because we can't really verify legality until we actually get the proposal and we can delve into that.
Okay. And I do recognize, because I know we have had some challenges that we discussed in closed session on illegal billboards. And so recognize that, but safe to say there are hundreds, there's lots of them. And I think that it was a wise decision to not want to continue to litter the city with these billboards. And since that time frame, there really hasn't been an opportunity coming in to do what we're doing now, which is look at, could we actually decrease the overall number of billboards? And I also appreciate the comments on the ratio. And I know staff had recommended the 10-to-1, and it's good to hear the community feedback on that as well. But I think that it's, and maybe, Martina, you can answer this as well, but if we were to simply just stop and leave things as is, then we're not going to eliminate any of the billboards, correct? We will still have then the several hundred billboards that we have today.
I mean, yeah, because right now we actually do, believe it or not, we have a framework to remove billboards in exchange for a new one, but it's I believe it is the 4-to-1 off the top of my head, but it's static to static. So we just don't see a lot of popularity in that program. I think in my time here, I believe I did the first swap, and that was because the billboard was on the Bascom Community Center site, and the city was building a community center. So we had to build, they had to swap it out. So no, I mean, while there is a policy framework right now, it's not really being used. So I wouldn't expect to suddenly see it being used a lot if we didn't do something right now.
We do, this is Michael, we do occasionally have billboards removed because of development. There was the Comfort Inn on 13th Street that was removed because of that development. So it does happen occasionally as part of a development proposal. It's tricky though, because sometimes the leases are long and they don't want to be bought out. The sign company doesn't want to be bought out, but yeah, it doesn't happen that often. So I wouldn't expect we would see many removed moving forward on a massive scale.
So if anything, we've seen a handful removed from unique circumstances, occasional replacement, which it sounds like it's the current replacement, clearly because they're replacing for a static billboard, is not being utilized heavily. And then, Michael, as you point out, occasionally for development, that's going to be if it obviously fits in the exact location where the billboards are at. But other than that, I think it's safe to say, and this was one of the things that was interesting to me, was that if we really wanted to be able to address some of the blight and the visual impact that we see currently, I have a ton throughout my district, District 3, a lot in neighborhoods. You go down Santa Clara Street, and there's a number of these old paper billboards, a lot of them that don't even get used really anymore. So they're tagged, they're graffitied. It's been years since maybe you've seen an actual new paper sign up there. And that certainly was of interest to me, was how might we be able to minimize that, decrease some of these. And indeed, there was a trade-off here, which was, well, then how do we increase that ratio, and how do we get rid of some of those blighted signs? I think it's also one of the concerns that came up, and this is why we wanted to get involved the representatives from the Lick Observatory. But I think clearly, anyone that's interested in the light pollution. There's a lot of work that's been done in regards to how we can actually now address that with digital billboards. But I actually just was noticing even yesterday at looking at some of the billboards that we have right now in the city and on my ride home, on the freeway and off the freeway, currently they're lit by traditional kind of spotlights that are sort of at the base, shining up to the billboard. Is that the case? Is that something that we currently have authority over, or can anybody speak to that, kind of how the current billboards, the paper billboards, are lit right now?
Yeah, I mean, seeing as we kind of generally banned them in the 80s, they all really would have been built pre-80s and pre a lot of those regulations, the acknowledgement of the dark sky, frankly. And so that's most likely, you know, if there are ones that people have upgraded the lighting without a permit, you know, they would not be able to do the uplighting with a permit today. If they wanted to upgrade the lighting, they would not be able to do that. So if it's new, chances are it is unpermitted, but generally speaking, they're old. They're from when before we knew any better.
And I guess my point is though that, and I think it's safe to say, especially just in my own, you know, just my own viewing of what's out there, that's what I see a lot of, right? Is the uplit, you know, paper billboards. I think it's safe to say because our policy is so old that the likelihood that the billboards have that, most of them do. My point was, is there a change to that or no? Based on what you were saying right now, Martina, only if they were to maybe get a permit to do new lighting, right? Then in that case, our new restrictions would go into place. Otherwise, they can keep the same lighting that they had from back in the 70s, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so light pollution, and the point here, right, is that light pollution is an issue now, right? It's an issue that we have, and even worse so because we have bright uplit paper billboards, and I know that that's a major issue. Another issue that I obviously also was interested in addressing, and one that if we just simply stop this work, and I know again going back to the argument of what priorities should be happening now or not, putting that aside, if we just simply stop the work, we don't change that. We don't change the currently old uplit blighted billboards either. And in fact, again, there's, you know, several hundred of them as is pointed out potentially, right, that we have, you know, if we go out and actually manage to count all the permitted and unpermitted ones, could be up north of 600. And so that's an interest of mine as well, and has been from the beginning. So I think there's certainly a lot of work to be done. I do appreciate that our community has said, hey, one of the biggest things we want is to ensure that more people are aware. I would agree with that as well. And from my office, we'll be reaching out to our different environmental organizations. And I know the Sierra Club and the Audubon Society submitted a letter, so we'll certainly be reaching out to them. But to have a conversation as well, and look forward to getting the staff feedback from the next community meeting. And with that, I think, is there a motion needed, I guess, just to accept the report?
There is a motion needed, yes. Thank you.
I'll move to accept the report.
Okay, can we get a second? Okay.
That's just to accept. Second.
Yes. Councilmember Foley is next to speak.
Thank you. And thank you for the report, but I'm having a hard time thinking that I should even be accepting it. I guess we accept the report, but I'm very concerned about moving forward with this for several reasons. Since the community, the public has become aware of these electronic billboards and the proposals, I have received 0 positive billboard letters, 0 in support of putting electronic billboards, and many emails from people back in July and continuing today from folks who are very concerned and not interested in having us install electronic billboards for a lot of reasons. Blight, distracted drivers, to name a couple of them. And you've heard several people talk today about their concerns. But one thing that didn't actually come up till today is the concerns about resources and how we are prioritizing something like billboards. And this is not to marginalize any of the work that staff has done, or that the priority when this was set prior to Councilmember Esparza and I being on council, we weren't around when this was made priority 3, but because these things take time to move through the process and be investigated. And I'm not judging the council at that time, but things were different. There are research. We were not in an economic crisis. We were not in the middle of COVID. We did not need resources for many other things. I'm very concerned about even accepting this report and moving forward. And I was hoping that we might be able to postpone it as of today and stop any further staff work on it. It's it sounds as if there isn't much left to be completed, but I ask myself if we should use the resources to complete it and bring it to council and then have it discussed and debated and not go forward at that point. And I don't know if it won't go forward at that point. The council may vote to move forward with phase 2. But what is the process for removing something from a priority list? Do we do that here or do we have to wait? Does the city council do that?
It's such an interesting question because usually you're trying to get us to prioritize things.
Well, I can think of my cannabis. I'd rather see cannabis resources going on that than this.
Yeah. So I would have probably 2 answers to that question, and then, Ed, feel free to add in. I mean, the first answer is it's probably best to prioritize or deprioritize in the context of a whole body of work, right? And as the city manager talked about last Tuesday, we have a draft roadmap for this fiscal year and a process to have community meetings and then engage the council on that in February. So that would probably be my first recommendation, is that to have that conversation in February. I think if the committee felt very strongly about deprioritizing it and halting the work right now, the process would be that this committee could make a recommendation and it would need to go to the full council for discussion and vote by the full council if you felt that you wanted that considered before the February planned session. Again, it's an interesting question, kind of the first time this is asked. Ed, is there anything you'd want to add?
No, I agree. The committee doesn't have the authority to stop a priority that the full council has approved. The request today is to accept the report. By accepting the report, you agree with the timeline and the information in the report, and it will just continue to move forward. As Kim said, the February date is the date when all of the priorities get reviewed. However, as she also stated, it is possible for you to make a recommendation to accept the report, but to move this forward to the full council, for the full council to consider whether or not to continue to move forward with this prior to the February date. Otherwise, accepting the report basically just asks the department to move forward with their plan under the report, and then you'll reconsider it in February when you consider all the priorities.
Thank you. So let me ask Council Member Perales, since you made the motion to accept the report, would you allow a friendly amendment to what it was that Kim said, that we bring it to council for reconsideration as a priority?
I would consider it. I think that the only concern I would have would be that we would be taking that conversation out of the context that Kim described that our city manager was already suggesting, which is one that would bring into the conversation all of the factors and all the priorities, much like we do every year when we talk about priority setting. Right, we're sort of making those determinations together. This year, much different, right, because we're talking about it during a pandemic, and hence why the city manager has gone through that process to determine what it is that we're actually going to put on the shelf and what we're not. And I don't, obviously, Kim, you'll have to speak for Dave here, but right, if I could get a sense of assurance that says, hey, look, we think we can take this out and have the discussion separately and be able to have a thorough presentation for the council that would really, revolve around this item, then I'm comfortable with it. But if it looks like Dave is going to say, hey, I'm not going to be ready until February to really have that discussion, then I'm not comfortable separating the two, and I would prefer that we wait until February to have that conversation. I would be comfortable in that case, sort of that this committee kind of gave that recommendation that we have concerns right, with this remaining on the priority list. But anyways, I'll defer to Kim for your best answer.
Yeah, I don't think it would be possible, say, on December 8th to have the conversation we're planning to have in February, right? It would not be in the full context. It would just be a conversation about, on the merits of this and how council feels about it, deciding to halt the work on this. But it wouldn't be in the context of trade-offs or contacts with other projects. That we're really prepared for in February with more community input happening in January.
And might I add, sorry to interject here, but I have to say that this made it to priority more than 2 years ago. And I think Councilmember Foley, you are very well aware of how hard it is to get something through the priority setting to begin with, to become a priority. And then the staff has worked on it for 2 years. None of these recommendations actually have to go anywhere. The city council could say no to all of them on that February meeting. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity to say no at that time. And for us to create more hurdles for staff is something that I would hope that you would reconsider. Because I think, like I said, 2 years worth of work for staff, at least let them have their report in public.
No, I appreciate that. I've never asked for anything to be removed from priority, and apparently it just doesn't come up. This is the first, so I'm trying to understand the process, and it sounds like the conversation we're having here is a good one. That's important for us to have, to listen to the community. The community should understand that we are not approving anything, that phase 2 will be going to the full council next year and may make it through priority again, or it may be revisited, or modifications may be occurring between now and then. So I appreciate the discussion, and I thank you for the opportunity. And it's just, this is something that I've heard, and I'm sure all council members have heard a lot from our community as to why this is not what they want to see on our streets and roads. Although I'm sure we're not hearing from billboard companies or people who want to pay for the signage because they want to advertise their businesses. I just haven't heard from them. All right, well, with that, I'll conclude my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Foley, and sorry I interrupted you. Councilmember Esparza, actually, before we go to Councilmember Esparza, Kim, I know that our council said that they are not willing to go past 5 o'clock, or some of us had trouble going past 5 o'clock. Do we need to do anything to defer item number six? Because we're still not there yet, and we're only about 7 minutes before, 6 minutes.
You may want to first confirm if you lose quorum, if we go a little beyond 5.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, let's go to Councilmember Esparza, and then you guys let me know how long you guys want to stay past 5. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll be quick. I wanted to thank my colleagues. Thank you, Councilmember Perales, for walking us through that. Because like Councilmember Foley, I have the same concerns. And so it was very helpful in terms of kind of leading me to where I'm ready for this to come to the council and for us to give a thumbs up or thumbs down. And so I think that needs to come before all of us so that we can make that decision and not have this drag on. So with that said, I'm ready for a vote.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Esparza?
Yes.
Perales?
Aye.
Diep?
Aye.
Foley?
Aye.
Camus?
Aye. Okay. Does the council, by vote of raised blue hand, can stay past 5 o'clock to finish item number 6?
I'm ready to move to accept this report.
Okay. All right. Okay, good. All right. So we will have a quorum. Wonderful. Let's move on to item number 6. which is the local small business contracting participation update.
So I just moved to accept the update, Councilmember
Okay.
Camus.
All right, and do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Staff, I'm kind of getting the idea from council that we will skip the presentation. Is that something?
Yeah, that's completely fine.
Okay. All right. And so we do have a public speaker on this item, which is Carl Davis Jr.
All right, I had to unmute myself. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, Carl. Yes, go right ahead.
I just want to say this because this is something that's very, very important. We've looked at a lot of things that's happened trying to help small businesses, loans, grants, all those types of things. And although those things are like Band-Aids, at the end of the day, I believe we've come up with something that can really stimulate commerce for small businesses. And I don't know if you guys have heard about it or not, but we created this online digital marketplace called the Silicon Valley Heritage Expo. Now it's one event with kind of dual purposes. You know, the first purpose is to have our small business have some type of online presence so they can get customers in this shelter in place sort of environment around this pandemic. We have to do things that are creative and use technology, and we think we've done it. So creating or stimulating commerce for small businesses, we do it at the expo while we celebrate our diversity. So those two things together are pretty powerful. Unfortunately, November 20th, we had a little tech glitch, and so we had to postpone it to December the 11th. But I'm just going out letting everyone know, although I'm the president of the Silicon Valley Black Chamber, I'm also the chair of the Silicon Valley Coalition of Ethnic Chamber, comprised of the Hispanic, Vietnamese, Filipino, Chinese, and us, the Black Chamber, and we're growing. We need to have our businesses online with a turnkey solution so people can come out and support them. And I'm asking city council people to help us, because at the end of the day, virtual chamber services and things like that can help our small business survive during this pandemic, and from this pandemic, get a new business model going forward. So I ask for your support. So whatever you could do, let me know. It's about building our city within our community.
Thank you. Okay, on to our council, Councilmember Perales.
Yeah, just if staff is aware, I know it was in their memo about doing the event on the 20th with the Black Chamber of Commerce. Is that the event Carl was just talking about that had a glitch?
I believe that is. Carl, thank you for that note. We'll be there at the November 11th event.
November 11th has passed.
I'm sorry, December 11th, I think.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I wrote it down December, I said November.
You'll miss that one too. Okay, what I wanted to mention, because I did see it in the report, that obviously the outreach efforts were not able to be as robust as we wanted this year. But I think one of the things that we've all learned is that the opportunity to be able to engage people through virtual means like this has actually improved, right? Or attendance at times, right? And I think we should take advantage of that. And not only, right, and that was great when I saw that on there. That's why I was bummed to hear that there was the glitch. But I think we should take advantage of more of these opportunities to virtually engage with our community, and especially the small business owners that want to know how to navigate this, huge city process, and that way they're not, as we know, feel like it's a daunting effort or something they don't want to engage in. And hopefully we can learn some lessons on how to continue to utilize virtual outreach and implement that into our program next year and the years to come to expand the attendance as well. I think this year more than ever, we realize how important it is that we as a city hold ourselves higher to getting more of these small businesses contracts, because right, it means so much in a pandemic like this, and so I think it's important that we continue that outreach, because that's a huge component of it. And that's it. That's my comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Perales, and we'll go to a vote.
Esparza,
Yes.
Perales,
Aye.
Yep,
Aye.
Foley,
Aye.
Camus.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, there is one hand up for public open forum. Blair Beekman.
Hi. To begin, well, like what I was trying to say earlier, we're going to really have to practice how to expand AB 3088 and its housing forgiveness ideas come January. Thank you. I think it is safe to say we saw our good and our good human potential as a country and as local communities in the last 2 years of the Obama administration in both domestic and foreign policies. I hope a new National Defense Secretary can be chosen in this spirit and has the ideas of peace, human rights, civil protections. BLM and defund are bringing important new ideas to the term American exceptionalism at this time. I would like to ask the simple question, were there any POA COLA increases between 2018 and 2020? If so, and even if not, I feel we can be assured there doesn't have to be a POA COLA increase for at least the year 2020 if people can be open to how federal and state funding and its developing financial mechanisms can very much help steady the economy for the next few years. And how to consider this final MOU contract work along with new contract agreements with Axon, it must be noted that Axon is now monopolizing the body camera and taser industry and is helping POAs to make body camera footage more inaccessible to everyday persons in their court trials and litigation needs. There is now the added condition that body cameras may pose a serious health risk to the future of police officers. This can lead to bad police officer decision-making on the street and may limit the ideas of long-term community sustainability promised by body camera openness and accessibility. Better public accessibility and police health is going to have to be much considered in the next 5 years. And to conclude and to once again offer, I think Anthony Amata would be a good choice to address issues like this as the new police chief. He seems to have a gentle soul. He has spent the last 15 years always attending community advocacy meetings, working with some constructed departments within SJPD needed to be a police chief, and is the current liaison with the San Jose Immigration Affairs. Not chosen for the job, he certainly seems the example of how to look for the next police chief of San Jose. Thank you for the meeting. I guess I just wanted to say thank you to Johnny Camus for all his work over the years. It was nice to meet him, and what the previous caller said about his work, I very much agree with that. So thanks for your work, Councilperson Camus.
Thank you. Okay, well, with that being said, I actually wanted to thank the two mayors who appointed me as the chairman of this committee. I think it's key that that business succeed. If business succeeds, so does San Jose. So thank you all for your patience with me over the years, and go for it. Thanks.
Johnny, I just wanted to thank you for your leadership. It's been a pleasure serving under you in this committee, and I wish you well in whatever your next venture is.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I chime in here for a second, Johnny?
Sure.
Sorry, my Bluetooth had cut out. But yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. You run one of the most efficient meetings, not as efficient as Pierre Luigi, but you run a very efficient meeting. And as you know, we have certainly disagreed on a number of things throughout the years. I found it extremely easy to be able to work with you. You're always very fair and give everybody an opportunity for a voice, and have appreciated serving on this committee with you, especially I think with the expertise that you've been able to bring and prioritizing the growth of business in our city. I think we will miss you certainly here at the city, and especially on this committee. So, but it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for the kind words, Raul and Pam. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.